The knock came at midnight. Alara's pen stopped mid-stroke. 5 years. 5 years of marriage, and Rowan had never once knocked on her study door. Never asked permission. Never hesitated. But tonight something had broken in him. She could hear it in the way his knuckles hit wood. 3 slow, deliberate strikes. Not a demand, a question. She didn't answer. Outside, snow began to fall across the northern estates of Greymark, covering the land Duke Rowan Hale had rebuilt with iron discipline and cold distance. Inside, Duchess Alara Voss sat surrounded by maps, pressed flowers, and journals filled with discoveries no one in the capital believed a woman could make. Between them, one locked door, one shattered certainty, and a letter that changed everything. This is a story about 2 people who built separate kingdoms in the same house, and the night one of them finally realized what he'd lost. If you want to see how far this story travels, drop a comment with your city below. Hit that like button. And stay with me until the end, because what happens next will surprise you. The letter had arrived 3 hours before the knock. Rowan sat in his study, the south wing, the one with the fireplace that actually worked, turning the parchment over in his hands like it might explode. It was addressed to Duchess Alara Voss, written in the formal script of the Royal Botanical Society. He'd opened it by accident. Or maybe not by accident. Maybe some part of him had known. We are pleased to inform you that your submission, Flora of the Northern Wastes, a comprehensive study, has been accepted for publication. Your identification of 17 previously unknown medicinal species represents a significant contribution to the field. We look forward to your lecture series this spring. 17 species. 3 years of correspondence. A lecture series. Rowan read it 4 times. Each time the words made less sense, not because they were complicated. He'd read military reports more dense than this, but because they described a woman he didn't know. His wife. The person who'd lived in the north wing of his own house for half a decade, who took meals in silence, who never argued, who seemed content to fade into the stone walls like morning frost. That woman didn't discover plants, didn't correspond with societies, didn't give lectures, except apparently she did. The fire cracked. Rowan stood, paced to the window. Outside, Greymark stretched into darkness. Fields he'd cleared himself after the war. Walls he'd rebuilt stone by stone. Order he'd carved out of chaos through sheer, stubborn will. This land had nearly destroyed him. He'd fought for every acre, bled for it. And he'd done it alone because that's what Hales did. They didn't ask for help, didn't need it. He looked down at the letter again. 17 species. God damn it, he said to the empty room. The north wing was cold. It was always cold. Rowan had offered twice to have the chimneys relined, but Alara had declined. Said she preferred it. He'd stopped asking after that. Stopped asking about a lot of things. Her study door was at the end of a hallway lined with portraits of Hales who'd been dead for centuries. Warriors, mostly. Men who'd held this land through blood and brutality. Their painted eyes seemed to judge him as he walked past. What are you doing, boy? Since when do Hales knock? Since tonight, apparently. He raised his fist, hesitated. Behind that door was a woman he'd married for alliance, for duty, for the preservation of 2 struggling houses. A strategic match, a necessary arrangement. They'd been civil, respectful, distant. He'd thought that was enough. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, silence. Rowan waited. He could hear something. Scratching. Pen on paper, maybe. Or perhaps she wasn't even there. Perhaps she'd gone to bed, and he was standing in a freezing hallway, knocking on an empty room like an idiot. He knocked again. Alara. Nothing. I know you're in there. Still nothing. But the scratching had stopped. Rowan pressed his palm against the wood. It was old oak, solid. The lock was new. She'd had it installed 2 years ago. He'd approved the expense without question because he'd assumed it was for safety, privacy, reasonable things. Now he wondered what she'd really been locking away. I need to speak with you, he said. A pause. Then, it's late. Her voice was clear, calm, completely unsurprised, like she'd been expecting this. This can't wait, Rowan said. Everything can wait until morning. Not this. Another pause. Longer. He heard movement, footsteps, the click of the lock turning. The door opened 6 inches. Alara stood in the gap, still fully dressed despite the hour. Her dark hair was pinned up hastily, a few strands escaping. She wore a simple wool dress, ink-stained at the cuffs. Behind her, Rowan could see a desk covered in papers, shelves packed with books he didn't recognize. And were those plants? Dried specimens pinned to boards, labeled in her precise handwriting. Her gray eyes met his without flinching. "What is it?" she asked. Rowan held up the letter. "This came for you." She glanced at it. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or concern, but it vanished so quickly he almost missed it. "You opened my mail." It wasn't a question, wasn't even an accusation, just a statement of fact. "It was mixed in with estate correspondence," Rowan said, which was true, technically. "I didn't realize until you'd already read it." Yes, Alara reached for the letter. Her fingers were stained with ink and something green. Plant matter, probably. Rowan didn't let go immediately. 17 species, he said. "Yes, you discovered 17 new species." "Identified," Alara corrected. "The plants were always there. I simply recorded them properly." "For 3 years." "4, actually. The correspondence took a year to establish." 4 years. 4 years of marriage, and he'd known nothing. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rowan asked. Alara tilted her head slightly, studying him like he was a specimen himself. "You never asked what I did with my time." "I assumed—" "Yes," she interrupted. "You assumed." "That's rather the point, isn't it?" She tugged the letter free from his grip and stepped back. The door began to close. "Wait," Rowan said. "Good night, Rowan." "Alara!" The door shut, the lock clicked. Rowan stood in the hallway, staring at the wood grain, feeling like he'd just lost a battle he hadn't known he was fighting. Dawn came early in Greymark. Rowan had barely slept. He'd spent most of the night in his study, pulling out every piece of correspondence from the past 5 years, looking for clues, evidence, something that would explain how his wife had built an entire secret life right under his nose. He found nothing. Their communication had been functional, polite. The grain shipment arrived. The south field needs drainage. I'll be in the village Thursday. Nothing personal, nothing real. At sunrise, he gave up and went to the stables. When words failed, work helped. Always had. But as he crossed the courtyard, he saw something that stopped him cold. Alara, walking toward the north gate. Not alone. 3 village girls followed her, maybe 12 or 13 years old, carrying satchels and talking excitedly. Alara led them toward the old groundskeeper's cottage, the one that had been empty for years. Rowan had offered to tear it down twice. She'd asked him not to, said she had plans for it. He'd assumed she meant storage. He followed at a distance. The cottage looked different. The windows had been repaired. Smoke came from the chimney. Through the door, which Alara left open, Rowan could see tables, chairs, a chalkboard, books stacked on shelves, more of those plant specimens on the walls. A school. She'd built a goddamn school. Rowan watched from behind a stone wall as Alara organized the girls around a table. She handed out journals, pencils, started pointing to a map on the wall. Her voice carried in the cold morning air. "Today we're studying root systems in frozen soil. Who can tell me why some plants survive winter while others don't?" A hand shot up. "Because they're stronger?" "Partially," Alara said. "But strength alone isn't enough. Survival requires adaptation, understanding your environment, knowing when to grow and when to wait." She glanced toward the window. For half a second, Rowan could have sworn she looked directly at him. "Some plants," she continued, "thrive in conditions that would kill others. Not because they're better, because they're suited to places no one else wants to grow." The lesson continued. Rowan stayed frozen behind his wall, watching his wife teach subjects he barely understood to girls who weren't supposed to be educated at all. It wasn't illegal exactly, but it wasn't done. Village girls learned weaving, cooking, basic household management, not botany, not science, not this. One of the girls raised her hand. "Miss Alara, what's this word?" Alara leaned over. "Photosynthesis, it means." "I know what it means," another girl interrupted. "It's how plants make food from sunlight. You taught us last week." "Very good, Margaret." Margaret beamed. Rowan felt something twist in his chest. Pride? Shame? He couldn't tell anymore. He turned and walked back to the manor. He had work to do, fields to inspect, accounts to review. Normal things, understandable things. But he couldn't focus. At noon, he found himself in the library, pulling down books on botany. Most of them were old, inherited from previous Hales who'd never cracked the spines. Rowan opened one at random. The language was dense, technical. He understood maybe half of it. Alara understood all of it, and more. He slammed the book shut. "Problem, my lord?" Rowan spun. His steward, Marcus, stood in the doorway with an expression of mild concern. Marcus had served the Hales for 30 years. He'd seen 3 dukes, 2 wars, and one very confused young lord trying to figure out his wife. "Do you know what the Duchess does during the day?" Rowan asked. Marcus's expression didn't change. "I believe she has various pursuits, my lord." "Such as?" "I couldn't say with certainty. But you could say with uncertainty." A pause. "I believe she spends time at the old cottage, my lord, teaching." "You knew." It seemed prudent not to mention it unless asked. Rowan laughed. It came out harsher than intended. "How many people know?" "In the village, most, I'd imagine. The girls talk to their families, word spreads. And no one told me." "You didn't ask, my lord." There it was again, that same response. "You didn't ask." "Marcus," Rowan said slowly, "am I really that unapproachable?" The steward considered this carefully. "You are a fair lord, just, respected. But you are also focused. You rebuilt these lands through discipline and order. People know not to disturb you with matters you haven't specifically requested information about. Even matters concerning my own wife, especially those, my lord. If I may speak frankly." Marcus hesitated. "Please do." "The Duchess has built something remarkable. The village girls are learning things they'd never have access to otherwise. Some will become healers, teachers. One might even become a scholar. These are opportunities that didn't exist before." "I'm not arguing against it," Rowan said. "Then what troubles you, my lord?" "Good question." Rowan moved to the window. From here, he could see the cottage in the distance. Smoke still rose from the chimney. "I didn't know," he said quietly. 5 years of marriage, and I didn't know my wife was brilliant." Marcus said nothing. Sometimes silence was the wisest counsel. Alara returned to the manor at dusk. Rowan was waiting in the main hall. Not obviously. He'd positioned himself near the fireplace with a book, trying to look casual, probably failing. She stopped when she saw him. Snowflakes melted in her hair. "You followed me this morning," she said. Not a question. "I saw you leave," Rowan admitted. "I was curious." "And now you know?" "Some of it." Alara unbuttoned her coat slowly. "What do you want, Rowan?" The question hit harder than it should have. What did he want? An apology? An explanation? Permission to be angry that she'd kept secrets? No, none of that. "To talk," he said. "Actually talk, not the way we usually do. We talk every day. We report to each other. That's not the same thing." Alara hung her coat on the rack. "And whose fault is that?" "Fair point. Both of ours," Rowan said. I didn't." He stopped, started over. "I didn't know you were interested in botany." "You didn't ask. You didn't tell me." "Would it have mattered?" The question hung between them like frost. "Yes," Rowan said. "It would have mattered." Alara studied him, really studied him, like she was seeing him for the first time. "Why?" "Because you're my wife." That's a title, not a reason. Rowan felt anger spark. "What do you want me to say? That I failed you? Fine. I failed you. I was so focused on rebuilding this land that I didn't notice I'd married a scholar. Someone brilliant. Someone who..." He gestured vaguely at nothing. "Someone who deserved better than polite distance." Alara's expression softened. Barely. "You were rebuilding. I understand that. The land needed you. And you didn't?" "I didn't need you to understand my work," Alara said carefully. "I needed you to acknowledge I existed beyond this house, beyond being the Duchess. I built something anyway, without your permission or your knowledge. I'm not angry about the school." "Then what are you angry about?" "I'm not..." Rowan stopped, breathed. "I'm not angry. I don't know what I am. For the first time since he'd knocked on her door, Ilara's guard dropped, just slightly. You're confused, she said, because the arrangement we made, the polite, distant, functional marriage, worked for 5 years, and now it doesn't. It never worked, Rowan said. It did for you. No, it didn't. I just didn't realize it until last night. Ilara walked to the fireplace. She stood close enough to warm her hands, far enough that they weren't sharing space. What changed? I read your letter. I saw what you've accomplished, and I realized that I've been living with a stranger. We've both been strangers, Ilara said quietly. Rowan moved closer, not touching, just less distant. I don't want to be strangers anymore. Why not? Because, he struggled for words that didn't sound hollow. Because you deserve better. Because this land, this house, this life, it's not worth anything if the person I share it with is locked behind a door I can't open. Ilara turned to face him fully. In the firelight, her eyes were more gold than gray. That door lock's from my side, Rowan. I chose to keep you out. I know. Do you understand why? He wanted to say yes, wanted to pretend he understood everything, but that would be another failure, another distance. No, he admitted, but I want to. Ilara searched his face for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled, small, sad, real. That's the first honest thing you've said to me in 5 years. All right. They ate dinner together that night. Actually, together. At the same table, in the same room, instead of the usual arrangement where Ilara took meals in her study and Rowan ate alone in the hall. It was awkward as hell. The venison is good, Rowan offered. Yes. Cook used that herb blend you requested. I noticed. Silence. The clink of silverware. The pop of the fire. Your school, Rowan tried again. How long have you been teaching? 3 years. How many students? 8 currently, 12 at the peak. What happened to the other 4? 1 got married, 2 moved to the capital for apprenticeships I arranged. 1 lost interest. Rowan nodded, filed that information away. The families don't object? Some did initially, but when their daughters started helping with harvests, identifying medicinal plants, teaching younger siblings to read, objections faded. You're changing the village. I'm providing options. The village is changing itself. More silence. Rowan pushed food around his plate. I'm not good at this, he said finally. At what? Conversation, personal conversation. I can discuss grain yields and tax policy for hours, but this, he gestured between them. I don't know how to do this. Ilara set down her fork. Neither do I, if it helps. You seem perfectly comfortable. I'm not. I'm terrified. That surprised him. Of what? That you'll decide my work is inappropriate. That you'll shut down the school. Assert your authority as duke and husband and lock me back into being just decorative. Rowan felt something cold settle in his stomach. Is that what you think I'd do? I don't know. That's the problem. We've been strangers for 5 years, Rowan. I have no idea what you'd do. He wanted to argue. Promised that he'd never interfere. But promises were just words, and words had been worthless between them for too long. I went to the library today, he said instead. Pulled down some botany texts. Ilara blinked. Why? I wanted to understand what you do. I made it through about 10 pages before my head hurt. A small smile. It's dense material. It's brilliant material. I just didn't have the background to appreciate it. That's not a failing. It is when my wife is an expert and I didn't even know. Ilara picked up her wine glass, turned it slowly. You've never been interested in plants. I'm interested in you. The words came out more intense than he'd intended. Ilara froze. Since when? She asked carefully. Since I realized I'd wasted 5 years taking you for granted. That's guilt, not interest. Maybe it started as guilt, Rowan admitted. But I spent all day thinking about those girls in your school, about the plants you've identified, about the fact that you've been corresponding with scholars across the continent and I had no idea. And what I felt wasn't just guilt, it was awe, maybe. Or envy. Envy? You built something meaningful. I built walls and cleared fields, physical things. But you created knowledge, opportunity, future. That's worth more than anything I've done. Elara stared at him like he'd started speaking a foreign language. That's not true, she said finally. This land was dying when you inherited it. You brought it back. That's not nothing. It's not enough. Neither is my work. Your work is going to be published. You're giving a lecture series. That's not... It's plants, Rowan. Dried specimens and Latin names, yes. Some have medicinal value, but I'm not changing the world. I'm just documenting it. You're teaching girls who'd otherwise have no education. That's changing their world. And you're providing stability that lets them survive long enough to learn. We're both doing what we can. Rowan leaned back. When did you become so diplomatic? When I realized arguing with you was pointless. That's not diplomacy. That's resignation. Maybe. They fell into silence again, but this one felt different, less empty, more present. I want to see your research, Rowan said. Elara's eyes widened. Why? Because it's yours. Because it matters. Because I want to understand what you've been doing for 4 years. You won't understand half of it. Then explain it to me. That could take weeks. I have time. Elara set down her glass. You're serious? Yes. Why? Because... Rowan stopped, started over. That night when I knocked on your door, you didn't answer. You could have. The door wasn't locked yet, but you chose not to. Yes. Why? Elara's expression shifted, guarded. Because I knew what you'd found, and I knew you'd either be angry or dismissive or, worse, politely supportive in that distant way you do everything. I couldn't handle any of those reactions. So you locked me out. Yes. And if I'd knocked again the next night, I wouldn't have answered. What about tonight? Elara met his eyes. I don't know. Rowan stood, walked around the table, stopped a careful distance away. I can't undo 5 years. Can't pretend I was a better husband than I was, but I can start now, today. And I can promise you this, I will never be dismissive of your work. Not ever. Promises are easy. Then let me prove it. How? Show me. Teach me. Let me see what you've built. All of it. The research, the school, the plans you've made that I know nothing about. Let me in. Elara stood too. They faced each other across 3 feet of empty space that felt like miles. And then what? She asked. Then we figure out what comes next. Together. I've been alone for 5 years, Rowan. I know how to do that. I don't know how to do together. Neither do I. We'll be terrible at it. Probably. But we could try. Elara searched his face again, looking for something. He didn't know if she found it. One condition, she said. Anything. Don't treat this like a project. Don't try to fix me or manage me or organize my work into something more efficient. If you want to understand, you have to accept that my world is chaotic, imperfect, sometimes completely illogical. I can do that. You're a man who rebuilt an entire duchy through order and discipline. Chaos makes you uncomfortable. You make me uncomfortable, Rowan said. I'm willing to be uncomfortable. Elara almost smiled. Tomorrow, dawn, meet me at the cottage. I'll be there. Don't be late. The girls arrive at sunrise. I won't. Elara moved toward the door, stopped, looked back. Rowan? Yes? Thank you for asking. Then she was gone, leaving him alone in the dining hall with cold venison and the strangest feeling that something fundamental had just shifted. The locked door hadn't opened, but maybe, just maybe, it had unlocked. Rowan arrived at the cottage 10 minutes before dawn, which meant he'd been awake since 4. He'd changed clothes 3 times, settled on something practical, then spent 20 minutes wondering if he should bring anything. A notebook? Too presumptuous. Flowers? Completely wrong. He'd finally left empty-handed, feeling like an idiot. The cottage door was already open. Lamplight spilled across the frost. Inside, Elara was arranging specimens on a long table. She glanced up when he entered, registered his presence with a small nod, and went back to work. No greeting. No acknowledgement that this was the first time he'd ever been invited into her world. Don't touch anything on the left side, she said. Those are being pressed. The right side is fair game. Rowan looked at the table. The left side held plants arranged between sheets of paper under heavy books. The right side was chaos. Roots, leaves, stems, all labeled with tags in Ilara's handwriting, scientific names he couldn't pronounce. "What am I looking at?" he asked. "Winter specimens. Most people think nothing grows this time of year. They're wrong." She held up a scraggly plant with silver-green leaves. "This is Artemisia borealis, northern wormwood. Locals use it for digestive issues but don't know why it works. The compound in the leaves, absinthin, has anti-parasitic properties. I've documented 12 uses." "You named it?" "No. Linnaeus named the genus. I identified this particular species and its applications in northern climates." She set it down. "That's the difference between discovery and documentation. Most of my work is the latter." "Still impressive." "It's thorough. That's not the same thing." The sound of footsteps interrupted them. The girls arrived in a cluster, cheeks red from cold, talking over each other. "Miss Ilara, I found that moss you mentioned." "My mother says the tea worked for her headaches." "Can we go to the South Woods today? Margaret says there's ice formations." Ilara held up a hand. The chatter stopped instantly. "Good morning. We have a guest today." She gestured toward Rowan. "Duke Hale will be observing our lesson." 8 pairs of eyes turned to him. Rowan felt absurdly scrutinized. These were children, teenagers. Why was he nervous? "My lord," they chorused, curtsying. "Please," Rowan said, "just continue as normal." One of the older girls, Margaret, he remembered, whispered something to her neighbor. They both giggled. Ilara shot them a look that could freeze water. "Journals out. Today we're examining winter survival mechanisms. Margaret, since you're feeling chatty, why don't you start? What allows certain plants to survive freezing temperatures?" Margaret's smile vanished. They're hardy?" "Elaborate." "They store energy in their roots?" "Partially correct." "What else?" Another girl raised her hand. "Antifreeze proteins. You taught us about those last month. They prevent ice crystals from forming in plant cells." "Excellent, Anne. Can you explain the mechanism?" Anne launched into an explanation that involved cellular structures and protein binding. Rowan understood maybe a quarter of it. Ilara listened, occasionally correcting or expanding. The other girls took notes, asked questions, argued about details. This wasn't a lecture. It was a discussion. A real academic discussion happening in a frozen cottage with village girls who weren't supposed to know these words existed. Rowan found a stool in the corner and sat, watched. Ilara moved between the girls, answering questions, pointing to specimens, drawing diagrams on the chalkboard. She was completely in her element. No hesitation, no self-doubt. This was her kingdom, and she ruled it with quiet competence. "Miss Ilara," one of the younger girls asked, "why do you care so much about plants?" Ilara paused. "Why do you think I care?" "Because you spend all your time studying them?" "That's how I spend my time, not why." Ilara set down her chalk. "Plants are survivors. They can't run from danger, can't fight back in any traditional sense. But they adapt, evolve, find ways to thrive in impossible conditions. I find that," she searched for words, "instructive." "You mean like us?" Margaret asked quietly. The room went still. Ilara met Margaret's eyes. "Yes, like you." No one spoke. Rowan felt like he was witnessing something private, sacred almost. Then Ilara clapped her hands once. "Right, let's talk about root systems. And the diagram, if you please." The lesson continued. Rowan stayed in his corner watching his wife teach and wondering how the hell he'd missed this for 5 years. When the session ended 2 hours later, the girls filed out, still chattering. Margaret lingered by the door. "My lord," she said carefully, "are you going to shut us down?" Rowan blinked. "What?" "The school. My father says nobles don't approve of village girls learning above their station. He says you'll shut us down once you know what we're doing." "Your father's wrong. So we can keep coming." "Yes." Margaret studied him like she didn't quite believe it. "Why?" "Good question. Why would a duke allow this?" It challenged tradition, upset social order, gave girls ideas about futures beyond marriage and housework. Because, Rowan said slowly, what you're learning is valuable, and value shouldn't be restricted by birth. Margaret's skepticism didn't fade. That's not what most nobles think. I'm not most nobles. You're married to Miss Alara. That makes you different or strange. Haven't decided which yet. Then she was gone, leaving Rowan alone with Alara and the distinct impression he'd just been evaluated and found wanting. She doesn't trust easily, Alara said, organizing papers. Smart girl. They're all smart. That's why I'm teaching them. She glanced at him. You didn't have to say yes. To what? Letting the school continue. You could have shut it down. Asserted your authority as Duke. Is that what you expected? I didn't know what to expect. That's why Margaret asked. They're all afraid you'll end this. Rowan moved to the table, looked at the specimens. Why would I end something that's working? Because it challenges tradition, makes people uncomfortable. Your steward told me 3 families complained last year, said I was putting ideas in their daughters' heads. What did you do? Ignored them. The girls kept coming. And the families? Still complaining, but quietly now. They know their daughters are learning things that make them more valuable. Harder to ignore that reality. Rowan picked up one of the labeled specimens. Calluna vulgaris, common heather. What does this one do? Antiseptic properties. Good for treating minor wounds. Also makes a decent tea. You've tested it? On myself, extensively. I don't recommend anything I haven't verified personally. That's dangerous. That's science. Rowan set down the heather carefully. Teach me. Alara looked up sharply. What? Like you teach them. I want to understand this. Really understand it. Rowan, you have an estate to run. I can do both. You do. I don't have your responsibilities. No, you just run a secret school, conduct groundbreaking research, and correspond with scholars across the continent. Much lighter workload. Alara almost smiled. Point taken. So teach me. It's not simple material. I didn't think it would be. You'll need to study, read texts, memorize Latin names. I'll manage. Alara crossed her arms, studying him. Why? Really why? This isn't guilt anymore. Rowan considered lying, saying something diplomatic, but she'd see through it. Because I want to know what you know, he said. I want to understand what drives you. What makes you wake up at dawn and catalog plants in freezing weather? What made you build this? He gestured at the cottage. I want to see the world the way you see it. That's not something you can learn from a textbook. Then teach me however you need to. Alara was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved to a shelf, pulled down a thick volume, and handed it to him. Start here. It's basic taxonomy. Read the first 3 chapters by tomorrow. Rowan took the book. It was heavy, dense. The title was in Latin. Tomorrow, he repeated. Morning lesson is at dawn. If you want to join, you need to keep up. I'll keep up. We'll see. But there was something different in her eyes now. Not quite trust. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. They walked back to the manor together. Not talking, just present. Rowan carried the book under one arm. Alara walked slightly ahead, her breath misting in the cold air. Your research, Rowan said. The publication. When do you leave for the lecture series? Alara's steps slowed. Spring. April, probably. How long will you be gone? 6 weeks? Maybe 8? That's a long time. Yes. The school will continue. I'm training Anne to take over lessons while I'm gone. She's ready. And the estate? You'll manage. You always do. They reached the manor steps. Alara turned to face him. Are you asking if I'm coming back? She said quietly. The question hung between them. Rowan realized he hadn't been asking that, but maybe he should have been. Are you? He asked. This is my home. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. She went inside, leaving him on the steps with a Latin textbook and the uncomfortable realization that his wife might leave in 4 months and never return. He read until midnight, understood half of it, made notes on what he didn't, fell asleep at his desk, and woke with the book's binding imprinted on his cheek. Dawn came too fast. Rowan showed up at the cottage with notes, questions, and a headache from trying to memorize plant classifications. The girls were already there. So was Alara. Pop quiz, she announced when he entered. Name 3 characteristics of the family Rosaceae. Rowan's mind went blank. Is this really? 3 characteristics. Go. The girls watched with barely concealed amusement. This was a test, not of his knowledge, of his commitment. 5 petals, Rowan said slowly, pulling from last night's reading. Numerous stamens, and fruit develops from the flower receptacle? Alara's eyebrow raised a fraction. Adequate. Sit down. He'd passed. Barely. The lesson was harder than the previous days. Alara didn't slow down for him, didn't explain things twice. He scrambled to keep up, taking notes, asking questions that probably sounded stupid to the girls who'd been doing this for years. At one point, Margaret leaned over. The Latin names get easier. Just memorize the roots. The roots, Rowan repeated. Word roots. Like Sylvanus means forest. So anemone sylvestris is forest anemone, see? He did see. And it helped. After the lesson, Alara announced they'd be taking a field trip. Where? Anne asked. The North Woods. There's a grove I've been monitoring. Time to collect data. The girls cheered, grabbed satchels and notebooks. Rowan followed, feeling out of his depth, but determined not to show it. The North Woods were dense, old growth. Rowan had hunted here, but never really looked at it. Not the way Alara did. She moved through the trees like she was reading a book, pointing out species, explaining relationships between plants and soil composition. The girls spread out, documenting what they found, calling out discoveries. Miss Alara, I found that lichen you mentioned. Bring a sample, carefully. Rowan tried to help. Nearly trampled a rare moss. Got corrected twice for improper collection technique, but he kept trying. They worked for 3 hours. When they finally headed back, Rowan's fingers were numb, and his notebook was full of sketches that looked nothing like the actual plants. You're terrible at drawing, Alara observed. I'm aware. But you paid attention. That counts for something. It wasn't praise, but it wasn't criticism either. That became the pattern. Dawn lessons, field work, reading until his eyes crossed. Alara never went easy on him, never slowed down. She taught him the same way she taught the girls, with high expectations and zero tolerance for laziness. Rowan had rebuilt an estate, led men in battle, negotiated treaties. This was harder, but he kept showing up. 2 weeks in, Marcus found him in the library, surrounded by botanical texts, muttering Latin names under his breath. My lord, the steward said carefully. The grain merchants are waiting. Tell them I'll be there in an hour. They've been waiting since morning. Rowan looked up, realized the sun was high. Damn. You missed 3 appointments this week. I've been studying, so I've noticed. The estate is fine. You've been running things smoothly for 30 years. You can handle grain merchants. Marcus didn't move. What exactly are you doing, my lord? Learning. Learning what? Everything I should have known years ago. He went back to his books. Marcus left without another word. That night at dinner, Alara set down her fork and looked at him. You're neglecting your duties. I'm managing. Marcus came to me, said you've missed meetings, postponed inspections. I'll catch up. Rowan, I'm trying to understand your work. That requires time. Not at the expense of your own work. Why not? You manage both. I've been doing this for years. You're trying to learn everything in 2 weeks. So I'm behind schedule. Alara rubbed her temples. That's not the point. The estate needs you. You can't just abandon your responsibilities because you decided to develop a sudden interest in botany. It's not sudden, and I'm not abandoning anything. You canceled the border inspection. I rescheduled it. For the 3rd time, Rowan set down his own fork. What do you want me to do? Go back to ignorance? Pretend I don't care about your work? I want you to find balance. Like you have? That landed wrong. Alara's eyes flashed. I've spent 5 years building balance, she said quietly. I wake at 4, teach until noon, conduct research until evening, manage household accounts at night. I make it work because I have to. You're throwing yourself at this like it's a military campaign. That's not sustainable. I'm trying. You're trying to fix something, again. You see a problem and attack it with discipline and force. But this isn't a problem, Rowan. It's a life. Mine. And you can't just brute force your way into understanding it. The words hit like a physical blow. Rowan stood. I should check on the merchants. Rowan, you're right. I'm behind on estate work. I'll fix it. He left before she could respond. Spent the next 4 hours in his study dealing with correspondence he'd let pile up. Marcus was right. He'd been neglecting things, important things. But the Latin names kept echoing in his head. The plant relationships, the careful observations Alara made. He couldn't just stop. Couldn't go back to not knowing. He worked until midnight, fell asleep at his desk again. The knock woke him. Rowan sat up, disoriented. The knock came again, soft, hesitant. He opened the door. Alara stood in the hallway in her nightdress and a heavy robe, hair loose. She looked exhausted. I'm sorry, she said. For what? For snapping at you. You're trying. I should be grateful, not critical. You weren't wrong. I've been obsessing. You obsess. That's what you do. I just forgot how intense it is when you focus on something. Rowan leaned against the doorframe. I don't know how to do this halfway. I'm either all in or all out. I know. It's infuriating. Sorry. Don't be. It's also... She hesitated. It's nice seeing you care this much. I just don't want you to burn out. I won't. You fell asleep at your desk again. That's burnout. That's dedication. That's exhaustion pretending to be dedication. Rowan almost smiled. Fine, I'll sleep more. And delegate to Marcus. He can handle the merchants. I know. And stop trying to memorize the entire taxonomic system in 2 weeks. Can't promise that. Alara shook her head. Impossible, man. You married me. Worst decision I ever made. But she was smiling, just slightly. They stood in the doorway, not touching, just existing in the same space for a moment. Then Alara stepped back. Get some sleep, real sleep, in a bed. You too. I will. She turned to leave. Stopped. Rowan? Yes? Thank you for caring, for trying, for showing up every morning even though you're clearly exhausted and the girls make fun of your Latin pronunciation. They do? Constantly, and as an impression. That's humiliating. It's endearing. They're mocking you because they like you. Wonderful. Alara's smile widened. Good night. Good night. She disappeared down the hallway. Rowan closed the door, looked at the piles of work on his desk, then at the botanical text still open on the side table. Balance. Right. He'd work on that tomorrow. The weeks blurred together. Rowan found a rhythm. Mornings with Alara and the girls, afternoons on estate business. Evenings split between research and administrative work. He slept less than he should, drank more coffee than was healthy, but he was keeping up, barely. The girls stopped giggling when he mispronounced things, started asking his opinion on specimens. Margaret even sought his help identifying a plant she'd found near her house. I think it's Hypericum perforatum, she said, but the leaves are slightly different. Rowan examined it. Could be a regional variant or a different species entirely. Have you cross-referenced? Not yet. Will you help? They spent an hour with reference books comparing leaf shapes and growth patterns. Finally determined it was a hybrid. Margaret documented it carefully in her journal. You're getting good at this, she said. I have a good teacher, several of them. Miss Alara's the best, but you're not bad. For a duke. High praise from a 14-year-old. That evening, Rowan was reviewing accounts when a messenger arrived. Official seal. From the capital. He broke it open. The letter was formal, polite, devastating. Lord Garrett Thorne, a prominent noble and member of the Royal Educational Board, would be visiting Greymark in 2 weeks. Purpose? To evaluate reports of irregular educational practices in the Northern Territories. Someone had reported the school. Rowan read it 3 times. Felt cold settle in his stomach. Thorne was notorious. Conservative, traditional. He'd shut down 2 scholarship programs for common-born children last year. Said education above one's station led to unrest. If he decided the school was inappropriate, he could order it closed. And Rowan's authority as Duke wouldn't matter. The Royal Board superseded regional autonomy in matters of education. Rowan found Alara in her study, showed her the letter without preamble. She read it, went very still. 2 weeks, she said. Yes, he'll shut us down. Not if we're prepared. Rowan, Lord Thorne doesn't believe women should be educated beyond basic literacy. He's certainly not going to approve of village girls studying advanced botany. Then we convince him. How? Rowan thought fast. We show him results, documentation, proof that the girls are learning valuable skills. We make it impossible for him to deny the program's merit. You think evidence will sway him? It's better than doing nothing. Alara set down the letter. He'll ask about funding, curriculum, my qualifications. He'll find something to object to. So we shore up everything, make it bulletproof. In 2 weeks. We've done harder things. Alara looked at him. Have we? Fair question. We have to try, Rowan said. And if we fail? If he shuts down the school anyway? Then we fight, appeal to the board, go over his head. That could take months. The girls can't wait that long. Some of them, Margaret's family is already pressuring her to quit. If the school closes, she'll have no reason to resist. Rowan grabbed her shoulders, gentle but firm. We are not letting this school close. We're going to prepare, present our case, and show Thorne exactly how wrong he is. Together. Alara searched his face. You're serious? Completely. This could damage your reputation, associating yourself with controversial educational practices. The other nobles can go to hell. I'm not letting bureaucrats destroy what you've built. Something shifted in Alara's expression. The last bit of guard she'd been holding dropped. Okay, she said. Together. They worked through the night, documenting everything. Student progress, curriculum details, practical applications of the knowledge, letters from families whose daughters had used their education to help with harvests, treat illnesses, teach younger siblings. Marcus helped. So did the girls. Anne compiled a portfolio of her own work. Margaret organized testimonials from village families. The younger girls practiced presentations. It was organized chaos, stressful, exhausting. But for the first time since they'd married, Rowan and Alara were working toward the same goal. Not parallel lives, not polite distance, actual partnership. This section needs more detail, Alara said at 2 a.m, pointing to Rowan's draft. It's detailed enough. It's vague. Thorne will tear it apart. Fine. How should I rewrite it? She showed him. He argued. She argued back. They compromised. It felt like progress. 10 days before Thorne's arrival, a problem emerged. 3 families pulled their daughters from the school. Said they didn't want the trouble. Didn't want their girls associated with something controversial. Margaret's family was one of them. She showed up at the cottage in tears. My father says I can't come anymore. Says Lord Thorne will cause problems for families who support you. Says it's not worth the risk. Alara's face went tight. I understand. I don't want to stop. I'm so close to finishing my studies, just a few more months, and I know. But I won't ask you to defy your family. What if I want to defy them? Margaret, I'm 14. In 2 years, I'll be married to whoever my father picks. This is my last chance to be anything else, to learn, to matter. Rowan, who'd been organizing papers in the corner, looked up, saw the desperation in Margaret's face, the fear. If you keep coming, he said carefully, and your father finds out, what happens? He'll be furious, might send me to work for my aunt in the capital, end my education completely. But you'd still come? If I could. If you'd let me. Rowan looked at Alara. She was watching him, waiting to see what he'd say. This was dangerous. Undermining parental authority, encouraging a child to deceive her family, everything Thorne would use against them. But it was also right. If you choose to continue your education, Rowan said slowly, despite your father's wishes, that's your choice. Not mine, not Miss Alara's, yours. We'll support that choice, but you need to understand the risks. Margaret wiped her eyes. I understand. I still want to come. Then you're welcome here. After she left, Alara turned to him. That was dangerous. I know. If her father finds out, if Thorne learns we encouraged defiance, we didn't encourage anything. We gave her a choice. That's not how Thorne will see it. I don't care how Thorne sees it. That girl deserves a chance to learn. I'm not taking that away from her. Alara stared at him. Who are you, and what have you done with my careful, by-the-book husband? Your husband is realizing that some rules are meant to be broken. She almost smiled. You're becoming a radical. I'm becoming someone who gives a damn. Took you long enough. Better late than never. Alara moved closer. Close enough that he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the fear she was trying to hide. We might lose everything, she said quietly. The school, your reputation, any chance of my work being taken seriously. We might. You're willing to risk that? For you, yes. For those girls, absolutely. For what's right, without question. Alara's breath caught. I never expected that I'd fight for this. Neither did I. But here we are. She reached up, touched his face, just her fingers against his cheek. The first time she'd touched him deliberately in 5 years. Thank you, she whispered. Then she stepped back, cleared her throat, went back to the papers like nothing had happened. But something had happened. Everything had happened. 4 days before Thorne's arrival, disaster struck. Someone broke into the cottage overnight, destroyed specimens, tore pages from journals, smashed the chalkboard. The damage was deliberate, thorough, meant to intimidate. Alara stood in the wreckage, silent, too silent. Rowan felt rage like he'd never felt before. Who did this? Does it matter? Her voice was flat, empty. Yes, they'll answer for it. And then what? We rebuild and they destroy it again? This is a message, Rowan. Someone wants us to stop before Thorne arrives. Someone powerful enough to order this. I'll find out who. We don't have time. Thorne comes in 4 days. We need to rebuild. Now. They worked like demons. The girls helped. Even some of the villagers who'd been skeptical showed up with supplies. Marcus coordinated repairs. By the 3rd day, the cottage looked functional again. But the damage had done its job. 2 more families pulled their daughters. The remaining students were scared. The night before Thorne's arrival, Rowan found Alara sitting alone in the cottage, staring at the repaired walls. We're going to lose, she said. We don't know that. I do. Thorne's going to walk in here, see a woman teaching village girls, and shut us down. The vandalism just gave him ammunition. Someone's feeding him information, setting us up to fail. Rowan sat beside her. Then we make sure he can't ignore what we've accomplished. How? Tomorrow, during his evaluation. We don't just present evidence, we show him. Live demonstration. Let the girls prove what they've learned. That's risky. If they're nervous, if something goes wrong, they won't fail. They're too good. You have a lot of faith in them. I have faith in their teacher. Alara looked at him. When did you become an optimist? When I realized I'd married someone worth fighting for. She didn't respond, just leaned against his shoulder. A small gesture, enormous in meaning. They sat in the cold cottage, surrounded by repaired dreams and uncertain futures, and Rowan made a decision. Tomorrow, when Thorne arrived, Rowan wouldn't just defend the school. He'd do something no Duke in Greymark's history had ever done. He'd publicly declare that his wife, a woman, was the smartest person in the Northern Territories, that her work mattered more than tradition, that these girls deserved education regardless of birth or status. It would be political suicide. It would challenge every norm. It would make enemies. He couldn't wait. Lord Garrett Thorne arrived at noon in a carriage that screamed wealth and disdain. Black lacquer, gold trim, 4 matched horses that probably cost more than most villagers earned in a lifetime. He stepped out like he was descending from a throne, his silver hair perfectly arranged, his coat immaculate despite the muddy roads. Rowan watched from the manor steps, felt his jaw tighten. Welcome to Greymark, he said, extending a hand. Thorne took it with the enthusiasm of someone touching something mildly contaminated. Duke Hale, your hospitality is appreciated. His eyes swept the courtyard, assessing, judging, finding it lacking. I trust your journey was comfortable, Rowan tried. As comfortable as one can expect in the Northern Territories, quite remote, aren't you? We prefer self-sufficient. I'm sure you do. Alara appeared in the doorway. She'd dressed carefully, formal but not ostentatious. Hair pinned. No jewelry except her wedding ring. Every inch the proper duchess. Thorne's gaze barely acknowledged her. Lady Hale, I understand you're responsible for the educational situation I'm here to evaluate. Duchess Voss, Alara corrected quietly. I retain my family name, and yes, the school is my initiative. How modern! Thorne's tone made it sound like an insult. I'm eager to see what you've accomplished, though I must say the reports I received were quite concerning. Reports from whom? Rowan asked. Anonymous sources, reliable ones. They suggest irregularities, inappropriate curriculum, questionable methods. Then let's address those concerns directly, Alara said. The students are prepared to demonstrate their knowledge. I'm sure they are. Children can be trained to parrot information. That doesn't constitute real education. Rowan felt anger spark, tamped it down. Losing his temper now would only prove Thorne's point. Perhaps we should begin, he said evenly. They walked to the cottage. Thorne examined everything with a critical eye. The repaired walls, the modest furnishings, the specimens arranged on tables. His expression grew more disapproving with each step. Inside, 8 girls stood in a neat line, clean dresses, nervous faces. Margaret was in the center, hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. These are your students, Thorne said. Not a question. An observation loaded with skepticism. Yes, Alara replied. Village girls. Students. Their birth circumstances are irrelevant to their capacity to learn. Thorne's eyebrow raised. How progressive. Tell me, what exactly are you teaching them? Botany. Basic chemistry as it relates to plant compounds. Taxonomy, scientific method, literacy and mathematics as supporting subjects. Botany. Thorne walked along the line of girls like a general inspecting troops. And what possible use would peasant girls have for botany? Anne stepped forward. We use it every day, my lord, identifying medicinal plants, understanding crop rotation, treating livestock illnesses. Basic chemistry helps us. I didn't ask you to speak, child. Anne's mouth snapped shut. Color flooded her cheeks. Rowan's hands clenched behind his back. Alara touched his arm lightly. A warning. Don't interfere. These girls are eager to demonstrate what they've learned, Alara said. We've prepared several presentations. I'm sure you have. Rehearsed performances mean very little. Thorne pulled a specimen from the table at random, held it up. You, the girl who spoke out of turn, identify this. Anne swallowed hard. That's Achillea millefolium, common yarrow. It grows in meadows and disturbed soil. The leaves and flowers have styptic properties. They stop bleeding. We use it for treating wounds. The compound responsible is achillene, which promotes blood clotting. And you know this how? I've tested it. Under Miss Alara's supervision, we document everything. Testing on whom? Ourselves. Minor cuts, nothing dangerous. Thorne set down the specimen. You allow children to experiment on themselves. How responsible? All scientific advancement involves some risk, Alara said. We take appropriate precautions. You're not a scientist. You're a noblewoman playing at education. There's a difference. The words landed like a slap. Alara's expression didn't change, but Rowan saw her flinch. Barely. Enough. Actually, Rowan said, keeping his voice level, my wife has identified 17 previously undocumented species. Her research is being published by the Royal Botanical Society. That makes her a scientist by any reasonable definition. Thorne turned. Does it? Or does it make her a hobbyist with connections? I've read the Society's correspondence. They're publishing her work as a novelty. A duchess who collects plants. Charming, but hardly groundbreaking. That's not, Alara started. I've reviewed actual scientific work, Lady Hale. Yours is adequate, thorough documentation of existing knowledge. But discovery? Innovation? I see none of that. Margaret's hand shot up. That's not true. Every eye turned to her. Miss Alara discovered that Artemisia borealis has different compound concentrations at different elevations. That's why it works better for some people than others. Nobody knew that before. We tested it. We proved it. You proved nothing, Thorne said coldly. You observed a correlation. That's not the same as causation. Any first-year student knows that. We controlled for variables. You're a child. You don't understand what proper experimental design even means. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She bit her lip hard, trying to hold them back. Rowan had enough. Lord Thorne, he said, voice like iron, you came to evaluate a school, not insult children who've worked harder than most adults I know. If you have legitimate concerns about curriculum or methodology, voice them. But treating students with contempt serves no purpose. Thorne's smile was thin. Defending your wife's pet project, Duke Hale? How gallant. But this isn't about hurt feelings. This is about appropriate education. These girls should be learning domestic skills, useful trades, not pretending to be scholars. They're not pretending anything, Alara said quietly. They're learning, growing, becoming more than circumstances would otherwise allow. That's what education does. Education within proper bounds, yes. This, Thorne gestured at the cottage, the specimens, the girls. This is ambition beyond station. It creates dissatisfaction, unrest. Girls who refuse good marriages because they think they're too educated for domestic life. Is that what you want? I want them to have choices. Choices lead to chaos. Order requires people to accept their place. Their place? Rowan repeated slowly. You mean barefoot and ignorant? I mean content with honest work appropriate to their birth. And if they're capable of more, then they're wasting potential that could be directed properly. A girl with Margaret's intelligence could be an excellent housekeeper and could manage an estate household. Instead, you're filling their heads with Latin names and useless theories. Anne stepped forward again. Her voice shook, but she didn't back down. It's not useless. Last month, I identified hemlock that someone mistook for wild carrot. Saved a child's life. That's not useless. A lucky guess? It wasn't luck, it was knowledge. Miss Alara taught me to look at leaf arrangement, stem patterns, smell. I knew exactly what I was looking at because I'd studied it. One incident doesn't justify an entire program. There are dozens of incidents, Margaret said. Anne's hemlock. My mother's headaches cured with fever few. Sarah helped her father treat crop blight. We're not playing. We're helping our families, our village. That's what education is supposed to do. Thorne's expression hardened. You're well rehearsed. I'll give you that. But this display changes nothing. I've seen enough. We've barely started the demonstration, Alara began. I don't need to see more. The situation is clear. You're teaching advanced subjects to students without proper foundation. Using experimental methods on children, encouraging girls to question their social position. This program is inappropriate and will be shut down effective immediately. Silence crashed through the cottage. Margaret made a small sound. Anne's hands balled into fists. The younger girls looked at each other, confused and frightened. Alara went very pale. You can't make that decision without reviewing the full curriculum. The board gave me authority to make immediate determinations in cases of educational misconduct. This qualifies. Thorne pulled out a document. Official seal. Already prepared. I'm ordering cessation of all teaching activities pending formal review. Given the remote location and limited oversight, I see no scenario where this program would be approved. This is because I'm a woman, Alara said flatly. This is because you lack qualifications, oversight, and proper judgment. Your gender is irrelevant. Bullshit, Rowan said. Thorne's head snapped around. Excuse me? You heard me. This has nothing to do with curriculum or methodology. You decided before you arrived that you'd shut us down. The evaluation was theater. I assure you, you're a liar and a coward. You can't stand that a woman is doing something you consider beyond her, so you're hiding behind procedure and authority to destroy what she's built. Thorne's face flushed red. How dare you? How dare I? How dare you come into my territory, insult my wife, demean students who've worked themselves raw for a chance to learn, and pretend it's about standards? You want to shut us down? Fine. Put your real reasons in writing. Tell the board you're closing the school because you don't believe women should be educated. See how that goes. I will report your insubordination. Report whatever you want. But know this, I'm fighting your decision with every resource I have. I'll go to the board, the royal court if necessary, and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly why you wanted this school closed. Thorne's smile returned, colder, more dangerous. You'd risk your reputation for this. You're standing among the nobility? Duke Hale, you're barely established yourself. Your family lost everything in the war. You've spent years rebuilding credibility. One word from me and you'll be a pariah. Then say the word. Rowan? Alara's voice was tight with fear. I mean it, Rowan continued. I don't care about reputation if it means abandoning what's right. These girls deserve education. My wife deserves respect. And you deserve to be exposed for the small-minded bureaucrat you are. Thorne's expression went ice cold. Very well. You want to fight? You'll have one. I'm not just shutting down your little school. I'm going to ensure that Duchess Voss never publishes another word, that her research is discredited, that no institution will touch anything associated with her name. And I'm going to recommend the board investigate your entire territory for educational violations. Every village, every household. By the time I'm done, Greymark will be synonymous with scandal. He turned to leave, stopped at the door. You had a choice, Duke Hale. You could have quietly accepted my decision, moved on. Instead, you've declared war on someone with far more influence than you realize. I hope your principles are worth it. The door slammed behind him. The cottage erupted. Girls crying, Anne cursing under her breath, Margaret shaking so hard she had to sit down. Alara stood frozen. Her face had gone from pale to ashen. What did you just do? What needed to be done? You threatened a board member. You called him a liar to his face. Rowan, he's going to destroy you, us, everything. Let him try. This isn't bravery, it's suicide. You have no idea how much power Thorne has, the people he knows, the favors he can call in. He will bury us. So we dig ourselves out. How? With what? We're isolated up here. No allies in the capital, no leverage. You just made an enemy we can't beat. Rowan grabbed her shoulders. We don't have to beat him. We just have to be right, publicly, undeniably right. So right that even his influence can't suppress it. That's not how the world works. Then we change how the world works. Alara stared at him. You've lost your mind. Probably, but I'm not losing this school. I'm not losing you. And I'm sure as hell not letting that bastard win. She pulled away, started pacing. We need a plan, a real one, not just defiance. Agreed. What do you suggest? I don't know. I'm a botanist, not a political strategist. I study plants. I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't fight people like Thorne. I don't know how. The girls had gone quiet, watching, waiting to see what happened next. Anne stood. What if we go public? What? Alara turned. What if we show everyone what we've learned? Not just Thorne, everyone. Write letters. Send our research to every institution. Prove we're not playing at education. We're doing it for real. The board would never, Alara started. The board isn't everyone, Margaret interrupted. Anne's right. If we can get enough people to see what we've accomplished, Thorne can't just bury it. He'd have to explain why he's shutting down a successful program. It's not that simple, Alara said. Why not? Margaret challenged. You taught us to document everything, to prove our claims, so let's prove them, to everyone. Rowan felt something click. She's right. She's 14, Alara said. She's brilliant, and she's right. We've been treating this like a private matter, something to defend quietly. But if we make it public, if we show the world what you've accomplished here, Thorne loses his power to suppress it. How exactly do we make it public? Your lecture series, Rowan said. It's in 2 months, right? What if the girls present with you? Alara's eyes widened. Absolutely not. Why not? Because they're children. Because the scholars will eat them alive. Because they're better than you think they are. Anne finished. We can do this, Miss Alara. We know the material. We've been studying for years. Let us prove it matters. It's too risky. Riskier than doing nothing? Margaret asked. Thorne's going to discredit you anyway. At least this way we fight back. Alara looked at Rowan. This is insane. Completely, he agreed. But I'm out of sane options. If it fails, if the girls are humiliated in front of scholars, it won't fail. You can't know that. I know them. I know you. I know what you've built here. Yes, it's risky. Yes, it could blow up in our faces, but doing nothing guarantees we lose. At least this way we have a chance. Alara pressed her hands to her temples. I need to think. Think fast, Rowan said. Thorne's going to start his campaign immediately. We need to move before he can consolidate opposition. Give me until tonight. Alara, tonight. I need to work through the logistics, figure out if this is even possible. She left. The girls followed, chattering nervously. Rowan stayed in the cottage, staring at the space where Thorne had stood. Marcus appeared in the doorway. The staff is talking, my lord. They heard shouting. I imagine the whole village heard. What are you going to do? Fight, loudly, publicly, probably stupidly. That sounds like you. Rowan almost smiled. Am I making a mistake? Without question, Marcus said. But it's the right mistake. That doesn't make sense. Neither does challenging a board member to defend a school for peasant girls. But you're doing it anyway. So either you've gone completely mad or you've finally figured out what actually matters. I'm hoping for the latter. What if we lose? Then you lose fighting for something worth fighting for. That's more than most nobles can say. Rowan looked at the specimens on the table, the carefully labeled jars, the journals filled with observations in neat handwriting, 5 years of work, knowledge, purpose. He wasn't letting it die quietly. That evening, Alara found him in the library. She looked exhausted, determined. I've worked out a plan, she said. It's going to require resources, money, travel arrangements, probably favors we don't have. Tell me. We bring the girls to the capital 2 weeks early, use the time to prepare them, find sympathetic scholars who'll listen before the official presentations, build support before Thorn can poison the well. That's good. What else? We need documentation, not just my research, testimonials from families, evidence of practical applications, medical records showing treatments that worked, crop yields that improved, real-world proof that this education has value beyond academic theory. I'll get it? We also need allies, someone with enough influence to shield us from Thorn's initial attacks, someone who won't be easily intimidated. Who? Alara hesitated. My brother. Rowan blinked. You have a brother? Half-brother. From my mother's first marriage, we're not close, haven't spoken in 6 years, but he's a duke, influential. If he backs us, why haven't you mentioned him before? Because we parted on bad terms. He didn't approve of our marriage, thought I was settling, marrying down. The word stung. Was he right? Alara met his eyes. I thought so for a long time, but now... She stopped, started over. Now I think maybe we both settled, and maybe we're finally becoming something worth being. Rowan moved closer. Will your brother help? I don't know. He's proud, stubborn, holds grudges. Sounds familiar. Are you comparing yourself to my brother? Are we really that different? Alara almost smiled. You're both infuriating if that's what you mean. I'll take that as a compliment. You would, she sobered. Rowan, if we do this, if we really fight Thorn, there's no going back. Win or lose, everything changes. I know. You could lose your title, your lands, everything you've rebuilt. I know that too. And you're still willing? Rowan reached out, took her hand, the first time he'd held it since their wedding 5 years ago. I've spent 5 years rebuilding walls and clearing fields, making this land productive again. I thought that was enough. That physical reconstruction was what mattered, but I was wrong. The only thing I've rebuilt that actually matters is standing right here. And I'm not giving that up. Not for Thorn, not for anyone. Alara's eyes glistened. We might fail. Then we fail together. That's not comforting. It's honest. She squeezed his hand, hard, like she was trying to convince herself he was real. Okay, she whispered. Let's fight. They spent the next week preparing. Rowan liquidated investments to fund the trip. Marcus coordinated logistics. The girls practiced presentations until they could recite them in their sleep. Alara wrote to her brother. The letter took 3 drafts. She sealed it with hands that shook slightly. What if he refuses? She asked. Then we find another way. There might not be another way. There's always another way. We just haven't thought of it yet. The response came 4 days later, brief, cold. Sister, I'll receive you. Don't mistake this for forgiveness. Come alone. We'll talk. He'll see me, Alara said, but not you, not the girls. That's a start. It's barely an opening. It's more than we had yesterday. Alara left for the capital the next morning. Rowan watched her carriage disappear into the snow and felt worry gnaw at him. This could backfire. Her brother could refuse. Worse, he could agree to help and then betray them to Thorn for political advantage, but they were out of safe options. Marcus found him still standing on the steps an hour later. You should come inside, my lord. You'll freeze. She's been gone an hour and I'm already useless. You're in love with her. Rowan looked at his steward sharply. What? You're in love with your wife. Took you 5 years, but you finally figured it out. We're not. My lord, you just risked everything to defend her work. You're standing in the snow staring after her carriage like a lovesick boy. You're in love. Might as well admit it. Rowan wanted to argue, couldn't find the words. Because Marcus was right. Somewhere between the locked door and the botanical specimens and watching her teach girls who weren't supposed to matter, he'd fallen completely in love with his wife. And he hadn't even told her. I'm an idiot, he said aloud. Frequently, Marcus agreed, but a well-intentioned one. What if something happens to her? What if her brother? Then you'll deal with it. That's what you do. You deal with disasters. This feels different, because it is. You're not trying to save land or money or reputation anymore. You're trying to save the person who makes all of that worth having. Rowan looked at the horizon where Alara's carriage had vanished. How do I do that? By being as stubborn and unreasonable in fighting for her as you were in rebuilding this estate, which, given your track record, should be entirely manageable. And if I fail, Marcus smiled grimly, then you'll have the consolation of knowing you tried, which is more than the man you were 5 years ago would have done. Fair point. Rowan went inside, started preparing for every possible outcome, good and bad. 3 days later, a messenger arrived. The letter was from Alara. Rowan tore it open. He agreed. Barely. We have his support, but it comes with conditions. He wants assurances. Proof. And he wants to meet you. Come to the capital immediately. Bring the girls. Bring everything. We have 2 weeks to make this work. Don't fail me. E. Rowan read it twice. Felt his heart hammer. This was it, the real fight. No more preparation. No more planning. He called for Marcus, started issuing orders, packed the research, arranged transport, get the girls ready to travel. We're going to war, he told his steward. About time, Marcus replied. The next morning, Rowan stood in the cottage with 8 nervous girls and enough botanical specimens to fill 3 wagons. We're going to the capital, he told them. We're going to show the scholars what you've learned. We're going to prove that education belongs to anyone brave enough to claim it. And we're going to make Thorn regret ever stepping foot in Greymark. And if we can't? Anne asked quietly. Rowan smiled. Then we go down fighting. Together. Which is better than living quiet. Margaret raised her hand. Will there be other lords like Thorn there? Probably. Good. I want them to see what they tried to destroy. The other girls nodded, scared but resolute. Rowan looked at them, these village girls who'd become scholars, these children who'd learned to fight with knowledge instead of weapons, and felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest. Thorn had no idea what was coming. They left at dawn. The journey to the capital took 6 days, cold, exhausting. The girls practiced in cramped-in rooms. Rowan reviewed documents until his eyes crossed. Every mile felt like moving toward a cliff edge. The capital appeared on the 7th day, massive, overwhelming, built for people who belonged. They didn't belong. They came anyway. Alara met them at the gates. She looked different, harder, more certain. My brother's waiting, she said. He wants to evaluate the girls himself before he commits to helping. When? Rowan asked. Now. They just arrived. They're exhausted. Thorn's already spreading rumors. We're out of time. She led them through narrow streets to a townhouse that radiated old money. Her brother stood in the entrance hall, tall, severe. He looked at Rowan like he was something tracked in on someone's shoe. So this is the Duke who married my sister for her family connections. And you're the brother who abandoned her when she needed support, Rowan shot back. Alara stepped between them. Can we skip the posturing? We have work to do. Her brother, Duke Julian Voss, smiled without warmth. The girls, show me what they know. Convince me this isn't a waste of my political capital. The girls filed into his study, set up specimens, arranged notes. Margaret stepped forward. We're ready, my lord? Prove it, Julian said. What happened next was the bravest thing Rowan had ever witnessed. 8 village girls stood in front of a duke who could destroy them with a word and proceeded to defend their education like seasoned scholars. They answered questions, demonstrated knowledge, explained applications. Margaret identified 17 species from memory. Anne diagrammed cellular structures on a chalkboard. The younger girls presented case studies of medical applications. Julian watched in silence. His expression revealed nothing. When they finished, he stood, walked to the window, stared out at the Capitol. "This is going to be a disaster," he said finally. Ilara's face fell. "But it's the kind of disaster I can work with." He turned. "Thorne's already organizing opposition. Half the board is prepared to vote against you sight unseen. The other half doesn't care enough to fight. We need to change the game entirely." "How?" Rowan asked. Julian smiled. Sharp, dangerous. "We don't defend the school. We put education itself on trial. Make this about whether knowledge should be restricted by birth or made available to capability. Force them to argue against merit, against potential. Make them look like the monsters they are." "That's risky," Ilara said. "Everything worth doing is." Julian looked at his sister. "I was wrong about him, about your marriage. I'm not often wrong. I don't enjoy admitting it." "Is this an apology?" Ilara asked. "It's an acknowledgement. Close as you'll get from me." "I'll take it." Julian turned to Rowan. "You're about to walk into the most hostile room you've ever experienced. Nobles who think you're a jumped-up war survivor playing at importance. Scholars who think your wife is a novelty. Board members who've already decided to shut you down. Are you prepared for that?" Rowan thought about the locked door, the 5 wasted years, the moment he'd realized what he'd almost lost. "I'm prepared to fight for what matters." "Good. Because tomorrow, when we present to the board, they're going to try to destroy everything you've built. Every achievement, every student, every moment of work. They'll question your wife's credentials, your judgment, the girl's capabilities. They'll be merciless. Let them try." Julian's smile widened. "Oh, I like him. Sister, you did better than I thought." "Don't let it go to your head," Ilara muttered to Rowan. But she was smiling too. That night, in separate rooms of Julian's townhouse, Rowan couldn't sleep. Tomorrow, everything would be decided. Win or lose, success or ruin. A knock came at his door. Ilara stood in the hallway, still dressed, eyes wide and frightened in a way he'd never seen. "I can't do this," she whispered. "Yes, you can. You don't understand. Tomorrow I have to stand in front of the most respected scholars in the kingdom and defend work they're going to tear apart. I have to watch them question everything I've done, judge me, find me lacking." Rowan pulled her inside, closed the door. "They won't find you lacking. You don't know that. I know you. I know what you've accomplished. And I know that even if every scholar in that room dismisses you, it won't change the fact that you've done something extraordinary. You've changed lives, created opportunity, built something that matters. That's not up for debate. What if I fail the girls? You won't. What if tomorrow destroys everything? Then we rebuild. Again. Together. Like we should have been doing all along." Ilara's hands shook. Rowan took them, held tight. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Me too." "You don't look terrified." "I'm very good at lying." She laughed, sharp, almost hysterical. Then she was crying, and Rowan was holding her while she shook with fear and exhaustion and 5 years of fighting alone. "I'm here," he said quietly. "Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever they say, whatever they do, I'm here. You're not alone anymore." She pulled back, looked at him with red eyes and something raw and real. "When did you stop being a stranger?" "The night you locked the door." "That's when it started. When did it finish?" Rowan thought about it. "Just now. When you knocked." Ilara kissed him, desperate, scared, real, 5 years of distance collapsing in a moment. When they broke apart, she was still crying. "Don't let me fail tomorrow," she whispered. "You won't fail. But if you do, we'll fail spectacular. Make them remember it." She almost smiled. "That's a terrible strategy. It's the only one I have." She left before dawn. Rowan stood at the window watching the Capitol wake up. Somewhere out there, Thorne was preparing his attack, marshalling allies, sharpening arguments. Rowan hoped the bastard was ready, because what was coming wouldn't be a quiet academic discussion. It would be war. And this time, Rowan wasn't fighting for land or title or reputation. He was fighting for the woman who'd shown him what actually mattered. He didn't plan to lose. The Royal Educational Board convened in a hall built to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings, Dark wood paneling. Portraits of dead scholars glaring down from the walls like judges at an execution. 43 board members sat in tiered rows, robes pristine, expressions ranging from bored to openly hostile. Thorne sat front and center, radiating satisfaction. Rowan, Alara, and the 8 girls stood at a table facing them. Julian watched from the gallery, expression unreadable. The head chancellor, an ancient man named Aldrich Brennan, banged his gavel once. The room fell silent. We are here to review allegations of educational misconduct in the Northern Territory of Greymark. Lord Thorne, present your case. Thorne stood, smiled like a predator. Thank you, Chancellor. The situation is straightforward. Duchess Voss has been operating an unauthorized educational facility, teaching advanced subjects to students without proper credentials, oversight, or approval. The curriculum is inappropriate. The methods are experimental and potentially dangerous. The entire program represents a flagrant violation of established educational standards. He pulled out documents, started reading. Each sentence was a calculated strike. Students as young as 11 have been exposed to chemical compounds with no safety protocols. Botanical specimens have been tested on children without parental consent or medical supervision. The instructor, Duchess Voss, has no formal teaching credentials, no degree from a recognized institution, and no authority to design curriculum. Alara's hands clenched beneath the table. Rowan wanted to interrupt, argue, defend. But Julian had warned them. Let Thorne talk himself out first. Don't react until the moment's right. Thorne continued. Furthermore, the program encourages girls to pursue education beyond their station, to question social structures, to develop ambitions incompatible with their circumstances. This creates dissatisfaction, disrupts families, and undermines the natural order that keeps our society stable. He paused for effect. I visited Greymark personally. What I witnessed was not education. It was indoctrination. Children parroting advanced terminology without true understanding. A noblewoman playing scientist while putting village girls at risk. Several board members nodded, took notes. The Duchess claims her work has merit, that she's identified new species, made contributions to botanical knowledge. But upon review, her research is merely competent documentation, nothing groundbreaking, nothing that justifies the risks she's taking with impressionable minds. Thorne sat, looked directly at Alara, smiled. The Chancellor turned to them. Duchess Voss, you may respond. Alara stood. Her hands trembled slightly. She gripped the table edge to steady them. Lord Thorne's characterization is both inaccurate and deliberately misleading, she began. Her voice was quiet but clear. He claims we lack safety protocols. In fact, every experiment is supervised. Every substance is tested first on plant material, then in controlled conditions. We maintain detailed records of all procedures. She pulled out a thick journal. This contains 3 years of safety documentation, protocol, results, incident reports. We've had exactly 2 minor incidents, both scraped knees from field work. Hardly the reckless endangerment Lord Thorne suggests. A few board members leaned forward, interested despite themselves. He claims I lack credentials. By traditional standards, he's correct. I hold no formal degree. But I've spent 8 years conducting original research. I've corresponded with established scholars who've reviewed and validated my work. The Royal Botanical Society has accepted my findings for publication, something they don't do lightly. The Society publishes novelties, Thorne interrupted. Curiosities. The Society publishes science, Alara shot back. My identification of 17 previously undocumented species has been peer-reviewed and confirmed. That's not novelty. That's contribution to the field. The Chancellor raised a hand. Lord Thorne, you'll have opportunity for rebuttal. Let the Duchess finish. Alara took a breath. He claims the girls don't truly understand what they're learning, that they're parroting information. I propose we test that claim directly. Allow the students to present their work, answer questions, demonstrate actual comprehension. Then the board can judge for themselves whether this is education or indoctrination. Murmurs rippled through the room. The Chancellor consulted with 2 advisors. An unorthodox request, he said finally, but not unreasonable. We'll allow a brief demonstration, 10 minutes, no more. Margaret stepped forward before Alara could designate anyone. I'll start. She moved to the center of the room, 8 pairs of eyes, 43 board members, focused on her. She didn't flinch. My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 14. My father's a tenant farmer. Before Miss Alara's school, I could barely read. Now I can identify over 300 plant species, explain their medicinal properties, and apply scientific method to test effectiveness. She held up a dried specimen. This is Salix alba, white willow, common along riverbanks. The bark contains salicylic acid, the active compound in willow bark tea that reduces fever and pain. It works by inhibiting prostaglandin production, which is why it's effective for headaches and inflammation. Any child can memorize facts, one board member called out. Then ask me something I haven't memorized, Margaret challenged. Silence. Then a woman in the third row, a scholar with gray hair and sharp eyes, stood. Why does willow bark work better for some people than others? Margaret didn't hesitate. Several factors. Body weight affects dosage. Metabolism varies between individuals. Some people have conditions that interfere with salicylic acid absorption, and preparation method matters. Tea extraction differs from tincture concentration. We've documented all of this through case studies in the village. You've tested on villagers. With consent, we never administer anything without explaining what it is, how it works, and potential side effects. Miss Alara taught us that ethical research requires informed participants. The scholar sat slowly. Continue. Anne moved forward next, started diagramming cellular structures on a large board Julian had provided, explained photosynthesis, answered questions about chlorophyll, light wavelengths, chemical processes. Her explanations were clear, precise, confident. The younger girls presented case studies. One described treating her mother's persistent cough with mullein tea. Another explained how understanding soil pH helped her father improve crop yields. They spoke plainly, without pretension, showing exactly how education translated to real-world application. The 10 minutes stretched to 20. The chancellor didn't stop them. When they finished, the room was quiet. Not hostile quiet, thoughtful quiet. Then a board member in the back, an older man with a thick beard, stood. I've taught at the Royal Academy for 30 years. Most of my students can't explain cellular biology half as clearly as that girl just did. How long have you been studying? 3 years, sir, Anne said. 3 years. Yes, sir. And you understand what you're explaining? This isn't rote memorization? I understand it well enough to teach it, sir. Which I do. To younger students. And to my siblings. The bearded professor looked at Thorne. You called this indoctrination. I call it exceptional teaching. Thorne stood quickly. They've been coached, rehearsed. This is performance, not comprehension. Then test them, Rowan said. He'd stayed silent until now. Time to push. Ask anything, off script. See if they can answer. Duke Hale, the Chancellor warned. You're not recognized to speak. I'm speaking anyway. Lord Thorne claims these girls don't understand their education. Prove it. Ask them questions they haven't prepared for. If they fail, you've made your point. If they succeed, his argument collapses. The room erupted in murmurs. The Chancellor banged his gavel. That's highly irregular. So is shutting down a successful program without proper evaluation, Julian called from the gallery. My understanding is that the board values evidence over assumption. Here's your chance to gather it. The Chancellor looked annoyed, but also intrigued. 5 questions. Different board members. If the students can't answer satisfactorily, we end this proceeding immediately. Agreed, Alara said. A woman in the front row stood. Explain the difference between monocots and dicots. Include examples. Anne answered. Perfectly. Another member. What's the Linnaean classification system and why do we use it? Margaret explained taxonomy with the ease of someone who used it daily. Describe a double-blind experimental design. What factors affect photosynthesis rate? How would you treat a case of suspected poison ivy exposure? The girls answered every question, sometimes hesitating, sometimes conferring quietly, but always arriving at correct, well-reasoned responses. The 5th question came from the gray-haired scholar. If you had unlimited resources, what would you research next, and why? Margaret looked at Anne. Anne looked at the younger girls. Then Margaret spoke. I'd study why some crops fail in our region while others thrive. Not just soil composition, we know that already. but the relationship between plant genetics, climate patterns, and long-term sustainability. Because if we understood that, we could help farmers make better choices, reduce crop failures, feed more people. The scholar's expression softened. That's a research question worth pursuing. I know, ma'am. That's why I want to pursue it. The room went completely silent. Then the bearded professor started clapping. Slow, deliberate. A few others joined. Not many, but enough. The chancellor banged his gavel again. We'll take a brief recess. Board will reconvene in 30 minutes to discuss findings. Everyone stood, filed out. Rowan pulled the girls aside. You were perfect, he said. We were terrified, Margaret admitted. Didn't show. I thought I was going to throw up when that professor asked about research, Anne said. Where did that answer even come from? It came from actually caring about what you're learning, Ilara said quietly. That's the difference between memorization and understanding. You know why it matters. Julian approached. Well done. But don't celebrate yet. Thorne's going to push back hard. This isn't over. He was right. When the board reconvened, Thorne was on his feet before the chancellor even sat down. Those girls are impressive, he said. I'll concede that. But impressive children don't justify an unauthorized program. They've learned despite the lack of proper structure, not because of it. Imagine what they could accomplish with real teachers, real curriculum, real oversight. They have a real teacher, Rowan said, a duchess with no credentials playing at pedagogy. A scholar with published research and 8 years of field experience. Experience is not qualification. Then what is? Rowan demanded. A piece of paper from an institution? My wife has produced more original research than half the scholars in this room. She's taught students who can outperform academy graduates. But none of that matters because she doesn't have a formal degree? Standards exist for a reason, Thorne said coldly. Standards exist to maintain gatekeeping, Julian interjected, to ensure that only people from the right families with the right connections can access education. My sister has proven that ability matters more than pedigree. You just can't stand that she did it outside your control. That's not... You wanted to shut down her school before you even visited Greymark, Julian continued. You'd already decided. The evaluation was theater. You're not protecting standards. You're protecting your own narrow worldview. Thorne's face flushed red. How dare... Enough! The chancellor's gavel cracked like thunder. This is a board proceeding, not a street brawl. We will maintain decorum. He looked down at his notes. The students have demonstrated clear competency. Their knowledge appears genuine and well applied. However, Lord Thorne's concerns about oversight and credentialing are not without merit. The question before us is whether informal education of this caliber should be recognized and supported, or whether adherence to traditional structures takes precedence. May I speak? Ilara stood. Briefly, I understand the board's concern about credentials, structure, oversight, but consider what you're actually evaluating. 8 girls from families that can't afford tutors have received education that rivals academy training. They've learned to think critically, conduct research, apply knowledge practically. They've changed their village, saved lives through medical applications of botanical knowledge, improved crop yields, taught their siblings. She paused. If you shut this down because I lack a formal degree, you're not protecting standards. You're privileging process over results, and you're telling every girl in that village, every child born without means, that their potential doesn't matter if they can't access traditional institutions. That's a false dichotomy, Thorne said. No one's saying they shouldn't be educated. You're saying they shouldn't be educated by me, despite evidence that I can teach effectively. That's not about standards, that's about control. The gray-haired scholar stood. Chancellor, if I may. Professor Winters, go ahead. I've reviewed Duchess Voss's research. Her methodology is sound. Her observations are meticulous. Her conclusions are well supported. Would I prefer she had formal training? Yes, but I cannot in good conscience claim her work is invalid simply because she learned independently rather than in a classroom. She looked at Thorne. You argue that credentials matter more than capability. I argue that's backwards. If someone can produce quality research, teach effectively, and generate measurable results, their path to that competency is irrelevant. What matters is the outcome. Professor Winters, Thorne said tightly, you're suggesting we abandon all standards. I'm suggesting we expand them. Recognize multiple paths to competency. Stop acting like universities are the only source of valid knowledge. More murmuring. The board was splitting. Rowan could see it. Some members nodding at Winters, others looking to Thorne for guidance. The chancellor called for order. We're going to vote. 3 options. 1. Shut down the program entirely, as Lord Thorne recommends. 2. Allow it to continue with board oversight and required credentialing for Duchess Voss. 3. Recognize it as a valid educational initiative operating outside traditional structures. That's unacceptable, Thorne said. Option 3 essentially endorses anyone teaching anything. Option 3 endorses proven competency, Winters interrupted. There's a difference. The vote took 20 minutes, board members conferring, arguing quietly, some looking conflicted, others certain. Finally, the chancellor stood. By vote of 24 to 19, the board has decided to allow the program to continue. However, he raised his hand as Alara started to smile. It will operate under probationary status. Duchess Voss must submit to periodic evaluations, maintain detailed records, and demonstrate continued student success. Failure to meet these conditions will result in immediate closure. Relief flooded through Rowan. Not victory, not exactly, but not defeat either. Thorne stood. This is a disgrace. The board is setting a dangerous precedent. The board has made its decision, the chancellor said firmly. Case closed. Thorne's expression went ice cold. He looked at Alara, at Rowan, at the girls standing quietly by the table. Enjoy this moment, he said quietly. It won't last. Then he left, robes billowing behind him like storm clouds. The room emptied slowly. Board members leaving in clusters, still debating. Professor Winters approached Alara. That was well done, she said. Both your defense and your students' demonstrations. Thank you, Alara managed. I meant what I said about your research. It's solid work. If you're interested in pursuing formal credentialing, not because you need it, but because it might open doors, I'd be willing to sponsor you. Alara stared. What? The Royal Academy accepts mature students in exceptional circumstances. Your published research qualifies. It would take 2 years, but you'd emerge with credentials that no one could question. I can't leave Greymark for 2 years. The school would continue, with proper oversight and your periodic involvement. You've already trained successors. Let them prove themselves. I need to think about it. Take your time. The offer stands. Winters nodded to the girls. You've taught them well. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. She left. Julian appeared at Rowan's elbow. That went better than expected. We won, Rowan said. You survived. That's not the same as winning. Thorne's going to regroup, find another angle. He doesn't lose gracefully. Let him come. We'll be ready. Julian studied him. You've changed. When you married my sister, you were a desperate lord clinging to scraps of former glory. Now you're... He searched for words. Now you're someone worth knowing. High praise from you. Don't get used to it. But Julian was smiling. The girls were celebrating quietly in the corner. Margaret had tears running down her face. Anne was laughing with something close to hysteria. The younger ones were hugging each other. Alara watched them. Her expression was complex. Relief, pride, exhaustion, fear. Rowan moved beside her. What are you thinking? That we won a battle, not the war. One battle at a time. Thorne meant what he said. He's going to come after us again. Probably. And Professor Winters' offer, formal credentials, that could protect us long term, but 2 years away from Greymark, is a long time, Rowan finished, but maybe necessary. I built that school. I can't just abandon it. You wouldn't be abandoning it. You'd be strengthening it, coming back with credentials that no one can dismiss, making the program bulletproof. Alara looked at him. You want me to leave. I want you to have every advantage, every protection. If that means 2 years at the academy, then yes. What about us? The question hung between them. What about us? The thing they hadn't discussed, the shift that had happened somewhere between locked doors and desperate kisses and fighting together in hostile halls. What about us? Rowan asked carefully. We're finally... Alara stopped, started over. For the first time in 5 years, we're actually married, actually partners. And now I'm supposed to leave for 2 years? I'll wait. For what? For you. For us. For whatever this is becoming. Alara's eyes glistened. That's not fair. Life rarely is. I hate that you're right. I'm rarely right. Enjoy it while it lasts. She almost smiled. Then she was in his arms, holding him like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? That if I leave, this us will go back to being strangers. That distance will undo everything we've built. Then we won't let it. How do you know? Because I'm not the man I was 5 years ago, and you're not the woman who locked me out. We're different now. Distance can't change that. Alara pulled back, looked at him with red eyes and something fierce. I love you, she said. Blunt, honest, terrified. Rowan felt his chest constrict. I know. That's it? You know, I've loved you since the night you locked the door, and I realized what I'd lost. I've loved you through every argument, every lesson, every moment of watching you be brilliant and brave and completely infuriating. I love you so much it's inconvenient. Inconvenient, Alara repeated. Extremely. It's ruining my ability to be a proper distant noble. She laughed. Wet. Shaky. You were terrible at being a distant noble anyway. I know. You improved me. I didn't improve anything. I just made you notice. Same thing. They stood there holding each other in a mostly empty hall, while the girls celebrated and Julian pretended not to watch. And somewhere in the capital, Thorne planned his next move. But for this moment, none of that mattered. They'd won. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough. That evening, Julian hosted a dinner. Small, private. Just family and the girls. The first time Rowan had been included in family by Alara's relations. The girls were exhausted, but happy. Margaret kept touching her plate like she couldn't believe she was eating in a duke's house. Anne asked Julian about his library. The younger ones were too overwhelmed to speak much. Alara was quiet, thoughtful. After the meal, Julian pulled Rowan aside. My sister's considering the academy. I know. You support this? I support her. Whatever she decides. Julian nodded slowly. You've surprised me, Hale. I thought you married her for political advantage. Turns out you just took 5 years to realize what you had. Better late than never. Indeed. Julian poured 2 glasses of wine, handed one to Rowan. 2 unlikely victories. And uncertain futures, Rowan added. They drank. Across the room, Alara was talking with Professor Winters, who'd joined them for dinner. Their conversation was intense. Serious. Winters was explaining something about course requirements. Alara was listening with the focus she usually reserved for botanical specimens. She was going to say yes. Rowan could see it. She was going to accept the academy offer. And he was going to support it. Even though it meant 2 years apart. Even though it meant managing the school without her. Even though it meant rebuilding what they'd just started to build. Because that's what partnership meant. Supporting each other's growth. Even when it was inconvenient. Margaret appeared at his elbow. My lord. Yes? Thank you for fighting for us. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. Why? Rowan looked at this 14-year-old girl who'd stood in front of the royal board and defended her education with more courage than most adults possessed. Because you deserved someone to fight for you. Because what you're learning matters. Because the world needs more people like you. People who refuse to accept limitations others place on them. Margaret's eyes filled. I'm going to make you proud. You already have. She hugged him, quick, fierce. Then ran back to the other girls, wiping her eyes. Rowan felt something settle in his chest. Purpose. Real purpose. Not rebuilding walls or managing land, but actually mattering. Making a difference in lives that would otherwise be overlooked. This was what he'd been missing for 5 years. Alara found him later, on a balcony overlooking the capital's glittering lights. I'm going to do it, she said without preamble. Accept Winter's offer. Get the credentials. I know. 2 years is a long time. It is. We'll write. Visit when possible. But it won't be the same as... I know, Rowan interrupted gently, and it's still the right choice. Alara moved beside him. When did you become so understanding? When I realized being right mattered less than supporting you. That's very mature of you. Don't get used to it. I'm still mostly stubborn and unreasonable. Good. I prefer you that way. They stood together, watching the city. Somewhere below, Thorn was plotting. The board was debating. The world was continuing to spin with all its complications and challenges. But up here, for this moment, things were simple. Two people who'd started as strangers, who'd wasted 5 years in polite distance, who'd finally found each other through locked doors and botanical specimens, and 8 village girls who deserved better than the world wanted to give them. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was real, and hard-won, and worth every fight. I'm coming back, Alara said quietly. I know. Not just to Greymark, to you, to us. I'll be here. Promise? Rowan took her hand, kissed it. Promise. She leaned against him, tired, relieved, certain. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Thorn's retribution. The logistics of academy enrollment, managing the school in Alara's absence, 1,000 complications. But tonight, they'd won. They'd proven that education belonged to anyone brave enough to claim it, that credentials mattered less than capability, that a duchess and 8 village girls could stand before the most powerful educational authority in the kingdom and force them to recognize truth. It wasn't the ending, but it was a beginning worth celebrating. Spring came to the capital while Alara prepared to leave for the academy. 2 months of academy enrollment procedures, curriculum planning, and saying goodbye to the girls who'd returned to Greymark without her. 2 months of watching Rowan navigate the political aftermath of their board victory while Thorn circled like a predator waiting for weakness. And 2 months of learning what it meant to be married to someone you actually loved. You're stalling, Rowan said, watching Alara repack her trunk for the 3rd time. I'm organizing. You're terrified. She stopped, looked at him. Yes. Of the academy? Of leaving, of 2 years apart, of coming back and finding we've become strangers again. Rowan crossed the room, took the folded dress from her hands and set it aside. That's not going to happen. You can't know that. I can. Because I'm not spending 2 years waiting. I'm spending 2 years proving I meant everything I said. Every letter, every visit, every promise. That's a lot of effort. You're worth it. Alara's eyes filled. Stop being perfect. It's unnerving. I'm not perfect. I'm obsessive. There's a difference. I've just redirected the obsession from land management to making sure my wife knows she's loved. Much healthier. Debatable. She kissed him. Long enough that the trunk stayed unpacked for another hour. The girls left for Greymark the next day. Anne would run the school under Marcus's supervision. Margaret would assist and continue her own advanced studies. The younger ones would keep learning, keep growing, keep proving that education belonged to anyone brave enough to claim it. Alara watched their carriage disappear and felt a piece of herself go with it. They'll be fine, Rowan said. I know. That's what scares me. They don't need me anymore. They'll always need you. They just don't need you hovering. There's a difference. When did you become wise? 5 minutes ago. Don't expect it to last. The academy's spring semester started on a cold April morning. Alara stood at the gates, feeling like an imposter. She was 32. Most students were 20. She'd learned botany in frozen fields, not lecture halls. She belonged here like a wolf belonged in a drawing room. Professor Winters met her at the entrance. Nervous? Terrified. Good. Means you care. Come on, let me show you around before the vultures descend. The vultures descended anyway. Other students staring, whispering. The Duchess who thought she could be a scholar. The woman who'd fought the board and barely won. The novelty. Alara held her head high and pretended their judgment didn't cut. The first lecture was taxonomy. The professor, a thin man named Aldous Crane, looked at her like she was a curiosity specimen. Duchess Voss, I've read your published work. Competent documentation, though I question some of your classification choices. Question them specifically, and I'll defend them, Alara said evenly. Crane's eyebrow raised. Bold. We'll see if your knowledge matches your confidence. It did. For 6 weeks, Alara proved herself in every class, answered questions other students stumbled over, conducted experiments with precision born from years of fieldwork, wrote papers that professors couldn't dismiss even when they clearly wanted to. But it was exhausting, constantly defending herself, constantly proving she belonged. The younger students treated her like an oddity. The professors treated her like a test case. Only Professor Winters offered genuine respect. "You're doing well," Winters told her after a particularly brutal critique session where Crane had torn apart Alara's methodology for 20 minutes before grudgingly admitting it was sound. "I'm surviving." "Same thing, in this environment." Alara collapsed into a chair. "I don't know if I can do this for 2 years." "You can. You're stronger than you think." "I miss my school, my girls, my—" She stopped. "Your husband," Winters finished. "That's allowed, you know, missing someone. We've been apart 6 weeks. I feel like I'm missing a limb." "Then visit. Spring break is next month. Go home. Remember why you're doing this." Alara wrote to Rowan that night, the first truly honest letter since she'd arrived. "I'm drowning here. Not academically. I can handle the work. But everyone looks at me like I don't belong. Like I'm playing at being a scholar instead of actually being one. Professor Crane spent an entire lecture implying my research was derivative. Other students whisper when I walk past. I'm so tired of fighting for basic respect. The only thing keeping me here is knowing that this matters. That credentials will protect the school, protect the girls, make it impossible for people like Thorne to dismiss everything we've built. But some days I want to quit, come home, let Anne run the school, and forget I ever tried to be more than a duchess with a hobby. I miss you. Inconveniently, distractingly. It's interfering with my studies. Tell me I'm not making a mistake." Rowan's response came 4 days later. "You're making the hardest right choice you could make. That's not the same as a mistake. Crane's intimidated by you. They all are. You're proving that formal education isn't the only path to competency. That threatens everything they've built their identities on. So they're fighting back the only way they know how, by making you prove yourself over and over. Keep proving it. You're better than all of them. The school's thriving. Anne's a natural teacher. Margaret's developing her own research questions. We had 2 new families request enrollment last week. Your absence hasn't diminished what you built. It's letting it grow beyond you. That's legacy. And yes, you're allowed to miss me. I miss you constantly. Marcus caught me staring at your empty chair at dinner like a lovesick idiot. I'm managing the estate, but half my mind is always wondering what you're doing, if you're eating enough, if anyone's making you laugh. 1 month until spring break. I'm counting days. Come home. Even if just for a week. Let me remind you why you're brilliant." Alara read it 5 times, cried over it twice, then got back to work. Spring break arrived like a pardon. Alara took the first carriage north, barely stopping for rest. The journey that had taken 6 days on the way to the capital took 4.5 on the return. She arrived at Greymark at dawn, exhausted and desperate. Rowan met her at the gates, looking older, tired, relieved. They didn't speak, just held each other while the sun rose over land they'd both fought to protect. "Welcome home," he finally said. "I'm only here for 8 days. Then we'll make them count." The school had grown. 10 students now. Anne teaching with confidence that made Alara proud and a little jealous. Margaret presenting research on crop rotation patterns that was genuinely innovative. The cottage had been expanded, new room for experiments, better equipment, a small library. "You've been busy," Alara said. "We had time and motivation," Anne replied. Also, Duke Rowan wouldn't stop asking if we needed anything. It was easier to accept his help than argue. Rowan looked sheepish. "I may have gotten invested." "You reorganized our entire filing system," Margaret said, "and built new specimen cabinets, and commissioned those diagrams." She pointed to detailed botanical illustrations hanging on the walls. "I had free time." "You barely sleep," Marcus interjected from the doorway. "You work on estate business until midnight, then come here to help with school projects until dawn." "That's an exaggeration." "It's barely an exaggeration," Marcus corrected. Alara looked at her husband, really looked. The dark circles under his eyes, the slight gauntness that suggested missed meals. He'd thrown himself into supporting the school the way he'd once thrown himself into rebuilding the estate, completely, obsessively, unhealthily. "You need to slow down," she said quietly. Says the woman who's taking double course loads to finish in 18 months instead of 24. "How did you know that?" "Professor Winters writes to me. Updates on your progress. She's worried you're burning out." "I'm fine." You're exhausted. We both are. Maybe we're both obsessive idiots who don't know when to rest. Probably. Definitely, Marcus said. My lord, you have that meeting with the grain merchants. Cancel it. You've already canceled twice. Then they'll understand I'm busy. My wife is home for 8 days. The grain merchants can wait. Marcus sighed but didn't argue further. Those 8 days blurred together. Mornings at the school watching Anne teach, afternoons with Rowan inspecting the estate and arguing about crop rotation. Evenings together in the manor, talking about everything and nothing. Nights relearning each other. On the 5th day, Thorne's letter arrived. It was addressed to the board, but a copy had been sent to Rowan. Alara read it with growing dread. I write to formally request re-evaluation of the Greymark educational program. Recent reports suggest the program has expanded without proper oversight. Student enrollment has increased. Curriculum has been modified. The original instructor, Duchess Voss, is absent, delegating responsibilities to an unqualified teenager. Furthermore, Duke Hale has been personally involved in school operations, creating inappropriate overlap between noble authority and educational independence. This represents a conflict of interest and potential misuse of ducal resources. I recommend immediate suspension pending full investigation. Rowan read over her shoulder. He's been watching us. He's been waiting for an opening. An unqualified teenager, Alara repeated. Anne's brilliant. Anne's also 17 and lacks formal credentials. He's not wrong technically, but he's wrong morally. Morality doesn't matter to the board. Rules do. Alara threw the letter down. So what do? We fight. Again, we document Anne's qualifications, show student progress, prove the school's operating within board guidelines. We barely won last time, and that was with me there to defend it. Now I'm at the academy, and you're running things. Thorne's right that it looks improper. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if we formalize it? Formalize what? The school. Make it an official institution with board recognition. Submit to their oversight willingly. Create a formal structure with credentialed teachers. You, once you finish the academy. Visiting instructors from established institutions. A real curriculum that meets their standards. That would take months to set up. Resources we don't have. And it still wouldn't address Anne's lack of credentials. So we get her credentials. Alara stared. How? Same way you're getting yours, Professor Winters sponsors exceptional students. Anne's exceptional. If Winters agrees to sponsor her, she's 17, the academy doesn't take students that young. For normal admission, no. But you're not normal admission, you're exceptional circumstances. Anne could be too. If we present her work, show what she's accomplished. That's insane. It's the only move that blocks Thorne completely. If Anne becomes an academy student, she's not an unqualified teenager. She's a sponsored scholar. If the school becomes a board-recognized institution with credentialed instructors, Thorne can't claim it lacks oversight. We beat him by giving him exactly what he claims to want, proper structure and credentials. Alara's mind raced. Winters would have to agree. The academy would have to accept Anne. The board would have to recognize the school. That's 3 impossible things. We've done impossible before. Not this impossible. Then we make it possible. Alara looked at him. This man who'd been a stranger 5 years ago, who'd learned botanical taxonomy just to understand her world, who'd fought the royal board to defend 8 village girls, who was proposing something completely outrageous with absolute conviction. You're serious? Completely. This could fail spectacularly. It could. But if it works, if we actually pull this off, we don't just save the school. We transform it, make it permanent, protected, a model for other communities. And if it fails, then we tried. That's more than most people do. Alara grabbed his face and kissed him hard. You're insane. You love me anyway. Unfortunately. Fortunately. That too. They wrote to Professor Winters that night, laid out the plan, included Anne's research, testimonials from students, documentation of curriculum, everything they could think of to make the case. Winters' response came 10 days later. Alara was back at the academy when it arrived. You're both certifiably mad. I love it. I've reviewed Anne's work. It's remarkable for someone her age, or any age, frankly. She thinks like a researcher, asks the right questions, designs solid experiments. With proper training, she could be exceptional. I can sponsor her for early admission, but she'll need to pass entrance examinations, demonstrate capability beyond her years. The Academy Board won't make it easy. As for formalizing the Gray Mark program, that's more complicated. The Educational Board would need to create a new category of recognized institution. They're not fond of new categories. But if we can show that this model works, that unconventional programs can produce legitimate results, we might force their hand. I'll help however I can, but this is your fight. Make it count. Winters. Alara showed the letter to Rowan during his next visit. They were in her small academy dormitory room, maps and papers spread across every surface. So we're doing this, she said. Appears so. Anne's going to hate leaving Greymark. Anne's going to love the challenge. She's competitive. Telling her she needs to prove herself to Academy snobs will motivate her more than anything. And the board recognition? I'm working on that. Julian's been making contacts, building support. There are board members who agree with Winters, who think educational standards need to evolve. We just need to give them ammunition. How? Results. Documented, undeniable results. I'm compiling 5 years of data, student outcomes, practical applications, village improvements, medical treatments, crop yields, everything the school has impacted. If we can show that this model works, that it produces measurable benefits, we make it impossible to dismiss. Alara looked at the man she'd married. Really looked. Somewhere in the past year, he'd transformed. Not into someone different, into someone more himself. Less concerned with appearing proper and more concerned with doing right. Less focused on maintaining walls and more focused on building bridges. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. For what? For becoming this. For caring about things that don't directly benefit you. For fighting for girls you barely knew because it mattered. Rowan smiled. You taught me that, caring about things that matter. I taught you botanical taxonomy. You learned caring on your own. Debatable. They worked through the night, planning, strategizing. By dawn, they had a framework, not perfect, but possible. Anne's entrance examination was scheduled for late summer. 3 months to prepare. Alara would help when she could, but Anne would need to study independently. Prove she could handle academy rigor. The board petition would go through formal channels. Julian would sponsor it. Winters would support it. Rowan would present the evidence. And Thorne would fight it every step. The summer was brutal. Alara juggled academy coursework with helping Anne prepare remotely. Letters flying back and forth. Practice questions. Detailed feedback. Anne threw herself at the material with terrifying intensity. Rowan compiled his evidence. 5 years of meticulous documentation. Every student outcome. Every practical application. Testimony from village families about how the school had changed their lives. Medical records showing treatments that had worked. Agricultural data showing improved yields. It was hundreds of pages. Irrefutable. Overwhelming. Thorne tried to block the board petition before it even got a hearing. Julian outmaneuvered him, called in favors, made it politically costly to oppose without legitimate justification. The board agreed to a hearing. September 15th, 3 months away. Anne's examination came first, late August. Alara took time away from the academy to be there. Rowan brought Anne to the capital personally. The girl was terrified. 17 years old, facing examiners who'd spent lifetimes in academia, expected to prove she belonged. I can't do this, she said the night before. Yes, you can, Alara replied. What if I fail? Then you fail trying something most people never attempt. That's still worth something. What if I embarrass you, and Duke Rowan, and the school? You won't. You can't know that. I know you. You're brilliant, prepared, capable. The only thing that could stop you is doubt. So stop doubting. Anne looked at her with wide, frightened eyes. What if I'm not good enough? You are. But even if you weren't, trying makes you better than everyone who never had the courage to try. The examination took 6 hours. Written tests, oral questioning, practical demonstrations. Anne emerged looking shell-shocked. How did it go? Rowan asked. I either passed brilliantly or failed catastrophically. No idea which. The results came 3 days later. Exceptional performance. Early admission granted pending completion of preparatory coursework. Welcome to the academy, Anne cried. Alara cried. Rowan looked suspiciously misty-eyed and claimed it was allergies. One impossible thing accomplished. The board hearing was different, hostile from the start. Thorne had spent months building opposition, convincing board members that Greymark represented dangerous precedent, that recognizing unconventional programs would undermine educational standards. Julian opened the presentation, laid out the proposal. Formal recognition for community-based educational programs that met specific criteria. Credentialed instructors, documented curriculum, measurable outcomes, regular oversight. Thorne interrupted within minutes. This is a backdoor attempt to legitimize unqualified teaching. Duchess Voss has barely begun her academy training. The program she founded operated for years without credentials or oversight. Granting recognition now rewards that violation. The program produced results, Julian countered. Documented, measurable results. 5 years of student outcomes that rival academy training. That's not violation, that's innovation. Innovation without permission is chaos. Permission without results is gatekeeping. The argument escalated. Board members taking sides. Some agreeing with Thorne that standards mattered more than outcomes. Others agreeing with Julian that results spoke louder than credentials. Rowan presented the evidence. 5 years compiled into comprehensive documentation. Student achievements, practical applications, village transformations. One board member, an older woman named Helena Marsh, studied the documents with clear interest. This is impressive, she admitted, but it still doesn't address the fundamental question. Should we recognize programs that operate outside traditional structures? Why wouldn't we? Rowan asked. If they work, if they produce capable students and measurable benefits? What's the argument against recognition besides institutional pride? Standards, Thorne said coldly. Without them, anyone could claim to operate an educational program. Quality would plummet. That's why we're proposing specific criteria, Julian interjected. Credentialed instructors, regular evaluations, documented outcomes. This isn't lowering standards, it's expanding paths to meet them. The debate raged for hours. Rowan watched board members argue, some genuinely considering the proposal, others dismissing it outright. Thorne was relentless, attacking every point, questioning every claim. Finally, Professor Winters stood. The room quieted. She commanded respect even from those who disagreed with her. I've taught for 40 years, she said. I've seen thousands of students. Most are competent. Some are brilliant. A handful are transformative. Duchess Voss is transformative, not because she followed traditional paths, but because she didn't. She learned from necessity, taught from passion, produced students who can think critically and apply knowledge practically. She paused. We can cling to traditional structures and watch education calcify into ritual, or we can recognize that capability matters more than credentials, that results matter more than process, that transformative teaching happens in frozen cottages as much as marble halls. This isn't about lowering standards. It's about acknowledging that we don't have a monopoly on learning. Silence. Then Helena Marsh spoke. Professor Winters makes a compelling point, but I still have concerns about oversight. How do we ensure programs maintain quality without direct institutional control? Regular evaluation, Alara said. She'd been quiet until now, letting others argue, but this question, she could answer this. The board already evaluates recognized institutions. This would be no different. Annual reviews, student assessments, curriculum audits. Any program that fails to meet standards loses recognition. Simple. And who determines standards for unconventional programs? We do. Together. The board creates criteria. Programs demonstrate they meet it. You maintain authority while expanding access. Everyone benefits. Marsh looked at her. You've thought this through. I've had 2 years to think about little else. And you truly believe this model can work? I know it works. I've seen it work. 8 girls, now 12, who wouldn't have had educational opportunities otherwise are thriving, learning, growing, changing their communities. That's not theoretical. That's real. Marsh nodded slowly. I'm inclined to support this. Provisionally. Thorne stood. This is a mistake. Lord Thorne, Marsh interrupted. You've made your objections clear, but I'm unconvinced that protecting traditional structures is more important than expanding educational access. If the Greymark program can meet rigorous standards, and the evidence suggests it can, I see no reason to deny recognition. Other board members murmured agreement. The tide was shifting. The vote took another hour. Arguments, amendments, compromises. Final tally, 28 to 15 in favor of creating a new recognition category for community-based educational programs. Greymark would be the first, but not the last. Thorne's face went purple. This is a disaster. You're destroying centuries of educational integrity. We're evolving, Marsh said firmly, as we should have done years ago. Thorne looked at Alara, at Rowan, pure hatred in his eyes. Enjoy this victory, he said quietly. It will be your last. Then he left, robes billowing, defeated but not destroyed. Rowan pulled Alara aside. We won. We won. Actually won, not barely survived. Won. I know. She was shaking. I can't believe we actually did it. Believe it, Julian appeared, smiling. That was well done, both of you. Sister, you've surprised me again. I'm full of surprises. Apparently, Father would have been proud. Alara's eyes filled. Julian never mentioned their father. You think so? I know so. He always said the best education happened outside classrooms. You proved him right. They left the board hall together. 3 people who'd fought bureaucracy and tradition and won. Changed not just a school, but the system. Outside, students were waiting. Word had spread. Anne stood with Margaret and the other Greymark girls. They'd traveled to the Capitol for the hearing, waited hours for the verdict. When they saw Alara and Rowan emerge, they erupted in cheers. We won? Anne asked. We won, Alara confirmed. More cheering. Margaret hugged Anne. The younger girls danced. Passers-by stared at the spectacle of village girls celebrating in front of the royal board hall. Let them stare. This was what victory looked like. 6 months later, Alara finished her academy coursework. 18 months instead of 24. Graduated with highest honors. Credentials no one could question. Professor Crane attended the ceremony. Approached her afterward. I was wrong about you, he said stiffly. Your work is not merely competent, it's exceptional. I apologize for suggesting otherwise. Apology accepted, Alara replied, though it took you long enough to realize it. Pride is a difficult thing to overcome. Yes, it is. Crane almost smiled. You're going back to Greymark. Tomorrow. They're lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have them. Rowan met her at the academy gates with a carriage and a smile. Ready to come home? He asked. So ready. The journey north felt different this time. Not escape. Return. Alara watched the landscape change from capital sprawl to northern wilderness and felt something settle in her chest. Home. Greymark appeared on the 5th day. The manor. The village. The school cottage. Expanded again, now 3 buildings connected by covered walkways. The girls met them at the gates. All 12, plus 6 new ones, 18 students total. Anne had been teaching in Alara's absence, running the school with confidence and skill. She'd applied everything she'd learned, refined curriculum, developed new teaching methods, made the program stronger. Welcome back, Miss Alara, she said. Welcome back yourself. How was your first academy semester? Brutal, illuminating, worth it. Good. They walked to the school together. Students showing Alara everything that had changed. New equipment, expanded library, a greenhouse for year-round specimens. Who paid for all this? Alara asked. Duke Rowan, Margaret said. He kept saying the school needed resources. We kept saying we didn't want charity. He kept giving it anyway. I'm invested in outcomes, Rowan said. Good resources produce better results. Simple economics. He's been here almost every day, Anne added, helping with repairs, bringing equipment, sitting in on lessons. The younger students adore him. I do not encourage that, Rowan protested. You bring them treats and tell them stories about the war. You absolutely encourage it. That's different. That's favoritism. I can have favorites, Alara laughed. The first genuine laugh in months. It felt like breathing. That evening, they stood on the manor steps watching the sun set over Greymark. The land Rowan had rebuilt. The school Alara had created. The life they'd made together from distance and misunderstanding, and finally, Partnership. I have something for you, Rowan said. He handed her a key. New, brass, unfamiliar. What's this? Key to your study, the north wing. I had the lock changed. Elara turned it over in her hands. Why? Bashawn. Because 5 years ago, you locked me out. You were right to. I hadn't earned access to your world, but I'd like to think I have now. So this is me asking, not demanding. May I be part of your world, the real parts, not just the public presentation. Elara looked at the key, at the man offering it, at the life they'd built. You've been part of my world for 2 years. I know, but you've never explicitly invited me in. I wanted to be invited. Rowan, I love you, completely, inconveniently, distractingly. I love your brilliant mind and your stubborn pride and your absolute refusal to accept limitations. I love that you taught village girls against all advice, that you fought the board and won, that you're going to change education in this kingdom, whether anyone's ready or not. He took her hands. But most of all, I love that you let me become someone worthy of loving you back. You didn't have to. You could have kept that door locked forever, but you didn't. You let me in, made me better, taught me what actually matters. I didn't teach you anything, Elara said. You learned it yourself. You showed me it was worth learning. That's the same thing. Elara held up the key. I don't need this. No, because I'm not locking the door anymore. You have standing invitation to my study, my work, my world, everything. No keys required. That's a significant trust. You've earned it. Rowan smiled. Then what do I do with this key? Keep it as a reminder of what we were and what we became. What are we now? Elara considered. Partners in everything, the estate, the school, marriage, life, all of it. I like that. Me too. They stood together watching their land settle into evening. Somewhere in the village, families were sitting down to dinner. Students were studying by lamplight. The future was unfolding in ways neither of them could have predicted 5 years ago. A door opened behind them. Margaret appeared. Sorry to interrupt, but Anne wants to know if you're coming to review the spring curriculum. She's worried about the advanced chemistry section. Tell her I'll be there in 10 minutes, Elara said. Margaret nodded and disappeared. Duty calls, Rowan said. Always does. Go. I have estate reports to review anyway. We're both terrible at relaxing. Completely terrible. Think we'll ever learn? Probably not. Good. Elara kissed him. Quick, certain. Then headed toward the school where students waited and curriculum needed planning and the future was being built one lesson at a time. Rowan watched her go. This brilliant, stubborn, impossible woman who'd changed everything, who'd shown him that walls and fields weren't enough. That real legacy was built in minds and hearts and transformed communities. He went inside, found Marcus waiting with the usual stack of correspondence. Anything urgent? Rowan asked. 3 things. Grain merchant wants to renegotiate terms. Southfield needs drainage inspection. And Lord Thorne sent another letter. What does he want now? To inform you that he's resigning from the board, effective immediately. Says he can no longer support an institution that has lost its way. Rowan took the letter, read it, smiled. He's giving up. Appears so. Took him long enough. Pride's a difficult thing to overcome. Indeed. Marcus hesitated. My lord, if I may, you've changed considerably in the past 2 years. For better or worse? For better. Much better. You've become the lord this land needed, not just rebuilding walls, building futures. High praise from you. Don't let it go to your head. Never. But Rowan smiled. That night he found Elara in her study, door open, papers everywhere, deep in curriculum planning. He didn't interrupt, just watched. This woman who'd been a stranger, who'd locked him out when he deserved it, who'd let him in when he'd earned it. She looked up, smiled. Join me? Always. He sat beside her, started reviewing documents, offering suggestions, arguing about teaching methods, being part of her world. The locked door had never been mentioned again because it no longer existed. In its place was partnership, real, hard-won, imperfect, but theirs. Spring turned to summer, The school thrived. Students graduated and came back to teach. Anne finished her academy coursework and returned to Greymark as a credentialed instructor. Other communities started requesting help establishing their own programs. The model was spreading. Alara published her second major research paper, then her third, became recognized in botanical circles not as a duchess with a hobby, but as a legitimate scholar. Rowan supported every step, attended lectures, helped with fieldwork, became her partner in research as well as life. They fought sometimes, argued about methods and priorities and how to balance estate management with educational expansion. But they fought together, working toward resolution instead of retreating into silence. 5 years after the locked door, Margaret graduated from the academy. First in her class, she'd specialized in agricultural botany, developed new techniques for crop rotation in northern climates. Her research was being implemented across the kingdom. She returned to Greymark for a visit, found Rowan and Alara in the greenhouse arguing about specimen organization. "Some things never change," she observed. "We're not arguing," Rowan said. "We're having a vigorous discussion." "You're arguing." "Fine, we're arguing, but productively." Margaret smiled. "I wanted to thank you, both of you, for fighting for us, for proving we mattered." "You proved that yourselves," Alara said. "You gave us the chance. That's what mattered." "What are you doing next?" Rowan asked. "I've been offered a research position at the Royal Agricultural Institute. Good pay, prestigious, exactly what I wanted. But I'm thinking about staying in Greymark, opening a research station here, teaching the next generation, paying forward what you gave me." Alara's eyes filled. "You'd do that?" "Someone has to. Anne can't run the school alone forever. She needs help, and I—" Margaret stopped, started over. "This place made me who I am. Seems right to help it make others too." "You'll be extraordinary at it," Rowan said. "I learned from extraordinary people." She left them in the greenhouse. Two people who'd started as strangers, who'd wasted 5 years before finally seeing each other, who'd fought bureaucracy and tradition and their own stubbornness to build something that mattered. "We did good," Alara said quietly. "We did," Rowan agreed. "Think it'll last?" "The school? Definitely. It's bigger than us now." "I meant us." Rowan pulled her close. "We've survived locked doors and hostile boards and 2 years apart. We'll survive whatever comes next." "Promise?" "Promise." They stood in the greenhouse surrounded by growing things, evidence of patience, care, proper conditions allowing potential to flourish. The locked door was 7 years gone, but the open one, the partnership they'd built, would last forever. Not because it was perfect, because they'd chosen each other, every day, through arguments and distance and impossible challenges. That was the real transformation, not walls rebuilt or schools founded or kingdoms changed. Two people learning to be partners, to fight together instead of alone, to build futures instead of just surviving presents. Outside, students were arriving for evening lessons. The next generation, learning, growing, becoming more than circumstances would otherwise allow. Inside, Alara and Rowan planned tomorrow's work. Together, always together.